to 68. This will be in the budget in March, and that will be 11 years earlier than planned.
Well, the move could raise billions for the Treasury, but would risk backlash from older voters forced to push back their retirement plans.
Now, it comes as economists forecast an even deeper recession than previously thought, and borrowing reaching a new 30-year high.
Well, joining us now is our head of digital news at GBNews, Dan Felby. Good morning to you, Dan. Look, lots of papers, all with pretty gloomy economic news this morning, a mixture of shock for the Chancellor at the extent of the borrowing and also a downgrade of economic forecasts. So it doesn't look hopeful for reduction in taxes in the budget in March.
Yeah, I think most people have been promised by the government that what we were going to have was, before the next election, these tax cuts. And I think the government made clear that, bear with us with these economic times right now and we'll be able to, then make these cuts going forwards. But clearly what we're seeing right now is that that's not going to come anytime soon. I think there'll be a lot of frustration and disappointment. This is a Conservative government. What people expect from the Conservatives is low taxes. That's not what they're getting at the moment.
Yeah. So what sort of reliance, is this really sending a message out that don't be dependent on the state pension in your provision for retirement?
I think that's not what they'll be saying. They'll be saying, look, we're still going to have a state pension. We're just going to have to change the years by pushing it back a year or two. The state pension age was already due to rise in the 2040s to 68. They're now talking about bringing that forward to maybe 2035. But I think, despite the fact the government will say we're still going to help you, we're just bringing that beige forward. I don't think that's how people are going to feel, though, is it?
Why can't they just say the country's broke and everybody's going to have to tighten their belts, and this is one of the ways we're going to tighten belts?
Because I'm not sure, I think we know that just will not go down well. What people see at the moment is their taxes are up, debt is up, interest rates are up, and now they're being told the state pension age is going to go up as well. You're going to have to work for longer. People are frustrated, I think.
Yeah, people are frustrated, but I think, Dan, if you just know the reason why with certain things, this just looks like it's a cruel Conservative government who's deciding, we're not giving you any money, so, off the state, so there you go. But there is a reason. We are trillions, not billions, we are trillions of pounds in national debt.
I think what people think, though, is that what more should I do personally? They think, I've worked hard my life, and it's interesting. We did a quick straw poll on Twitter yesterday asking people, are the Conservatives still the party that reward hard work? 91% of people said no.
Mm-hmm. And they'd be right, wouldn't they?
And that's where I think the Conservative government have got a real problem right now. People think, hold on, why am I the one being forced to pay again? I'm working hard, I'm doing my bit. Why is it always me who seems to suffer?
But what's the alternative? We're all living now into our 80s and 90s. We've got a dropping birth rate. We've got huge problems with the economy. Someone's got to balance the books. There is no other choice, is there?
But that's what I'm saying. I was saying, why don't they just tell the truth? That we can swallow, that we understand. It's the idea, why are they cutting back on this just because they can type thing? That's not the case. It is as Isabel stated.
And they're going to have to level with the public on this, because the problem is they tried to level with the public last year, saying, following the Liz Truss mini-budget, we're going to have to increase taxes. It's going to take longer for them to come down, but they were still promising about them coming soon. I think what we saw from yesterday's figures, which showed that the level of debt was far higher than everyone thought, and actually the rate of borrowing in December was twice the level of December before. They're going to have to level with the public once again.
You keep using that word level. Funny enough, Michael Gove's going to give a big speech in Manchester today, and apparently levelling up is non-existent. It doesn't seem to be happening, despite all the promises and all the, you could say, lies that people were given.
And Michael Gove's going to come under an awful lot of pressure. So it's this Convention of the North conference that they have every year, where all the northern mayors and the Levelling Up Secretary and the Shallow Levelling Up Secretary, they all get together and they talk about what needs to be done for the north of England. And northern mayors are saying, we want it actually written into law now that we have to get as much funding as the south to make sure that we prosper economically. And I think it gets to something when they're saying, we don't trust you on your word. We need this written down in UK law.
That's interesting. I also saw that if the North were a country, Greece would be the only OECD nation to enjoy less public and private investment than the North.
And these are all damning figures, because, as you just said, Eamonn, this is it. This is what the government have said that they were going to do. That's what they promised in 2019.
That was the Red Wall vote, wasn't it? Besides Brexit, more investment in your constituency.
And we're getting closer and closer to an election next year now, and they're failing to deliver.
Yeah, incidentally, if you're listening or you're watching, from up north, wherever that is deemed to be. Where is up north regarded to be? Is it north of
North
Birmingham?
of Watford.
North of Watford.
For Southerners like me.
So the Midlands would be up north as well.
That's a good question, actually. What is defined as the north,
as the
from
north,
a government point of view?
Basically, it's everywhere but London, really, and that includes down south and southwest, because, it'd be wrong to say...
Well, exactly. Levelling up doesn't include those sorts of places.
Absolutely right. East Anglia, whatever. But basically, are you being sold a pup with all of this? Are you being sold a lie? What is your view? I mean, you go around this beautiful, beautiful land, this country, and it's just stupendous. The idea that you wouldn't have a better standard of living in Cheshire or in Yorkshire or in Scotland or whatever is an absolute nonsense, and yet you are not being funded to the same level. Why is that? Let us know your views, let us know your stories. Would you rather be up north or down south? Let us know.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. Well, Dan, as you say, that big speech, and the mayors are all getting together, and they will be beating their drums, and they will be angry, and they'll be angry on behalf of their constituents and things. But why? Just can you explain to people generally where the money goes down south and why it goes down south?
I think why it goes down south is one that will confuse everyone. But what we saw last week was they did this levelling up funding. Where different local councils could put in their bids for why they needed this funding, which was being put in a pot called levelling up. And more money went to the south than to the north. Now, Rishi Sunak has said that levelling up isn't just about the north of England, it's about the whole of the UK. And that there are areas in the south which are equally deprived, and therefore areas in the south which also need this funding, and you shouldn't, just because it's gone to the south, feel that means that we're supporting the south more than the north. That might be the rhetoric they give. That's not how people feel, and that really does matter in politics.
What's the national debt now? What's the level of borrowing? The trillion thing? Is it
2.5 trillion, isn't it?
Yeah.
2.5 trillion. Right. So here's what we're going to ask you this morning, listeners and viewers. What would you cut? Right, we just can't keep spending. We just can't keep giving everybody, everywhere, money. What would be the first to go? Would it be the foreign aid budget? Would it be, I don't know. But you may know, you may see where money is being wasted. Where would you make the cuts? Give the government a help. Give them a little nudge and let them know where that would go. Dan, thank you very much indeed. We're now going to continue talking about pensions.
We are. We're going to speak to the head of retirement policy at AJ Bell, Tom Selby. Good morning to you. It seems as though the government have identified this area as a lucrative option for them. How much could it generate for the government to raise the retirement age to 68?
Good morning. So it will depend how quickly they decide to accelerate the increase in the state pension age. So at the moment, the plan is to increase the state pension age to 67 by 2028. That's set in stone, so that's not going to change. But the plan is then to increase the state pension age to 68 by 2046. Now, the talk is of bringing that forward to somewhere in the mid to late 2030, so perhaps to 2039. Now, the government costed this approach way back in 2017, and you were looking at raising somewhere between £5 and £10 billion a year for that period where they accelerated the state pension age increase. Now, clearly the amount that will be saved will be higher now because of inflation and cost of things like that. But so you'd be looking at tens of billions of pounds potentially to be raised by the government over a space of, say, 7 years. So you might be talking 70, 80 billion pounds. So a significant carrot for the Treasury in terms of why it might want to do this.
There'll be lots of people listening and watching to us this morning and thinking, well, I was planning on retiring in a few years' time. Suddenly the goalposts move. That changes their own personal finances significantly. What advice would you give to anyone who's worried this morning about this news?
So I'd say the first thing is that if you're close to the state pension age, then you shouldn't be affected. So if you're going to reach, so at the moment the state pension age is 66. Clearly, if you've already reached that age, you'll be fine. If you're due to if you're due to receive the state pension in the next few years, then you're not going to be affected. What we're talking about here is whether or not. So at the moment, anyone who's younger than roughly 45, 44 already has a state pension age of 68, so that's already written into legislation. The question is whether another group of people, potentially up until their mid-50s, are going to see their state pension age increase by another year. Now, that's going to be difficult if that does happen for lots of people, but the key message, I think, is that the state pension should just be part of your retirement planning. It is difficult because clearly the decisions over the state pension are political decisions, and it's always possible that the state pension age will be moved as well as the amount will be changed. And so I think the main message to people is to make sure that you're providing for yourself and not just relying on the state to provide for you in retirement.
Tom, just to get that message home, just to emphasise what you're saying there, can you tell people how much the state pension currently is? Do you know?
Yes, so it depends. So it depends if you were in receipt of the state pension before 2016 or after 2016. The full flat rate state pension today is worth just over £185 a week. So that's just shy of £10,000 a year. It is going to go up significantly in April, so it's going up by 10.1% in line with inflation. So the full flat rate state pension will go up to beyond £10,000 for the first time. So that's a decent foundation for most people, but in reality, most people probably don't want to be relying on an income of £10,000 a year for the rest of their older years.
Thank you to Tom. Thanks for explaining all of that, and food for thought for people.
Lots of emails coming in about what people would cut. Really interesting. I think this actually feeds into the public lack of sympathy for these strikes. They say we just can't afford these inflation-busting pay rises. The government's right to stand firm on that. Jeffrey Harris has said scrap HS2 and save $200 billion straight away. It's a no-brainer. And Gary Chapman says I would cut MPs' expenses. I mean, lots of pretty decent suggestions there.
But you see, the thing about the state pension is people would say, OK, 185 quid a week, whatever. All of these things are fine until you need to spend money, until your health disappears or you want to change your car or you want to go on a holiday. So it's the extra. It's fine saying, I can get by on this. But then in your everyday life, when you need to decorate your house or, you know, the roof comes off or whatever it happens to be, how do you cover that? So the message is, goodness me, and we should all be taught this at school, save
for retirement.
If only I had have saved in life.
I know.
I look back at life now and I think...
You've had a good time, though.
I've had a good time.
I'm here for a good time, not a long time. That's what our motto needs to be.
So save, and, you know, get that financial advice. But it is scary. The future's scary. But then, if you're lucky enough to live to claim your pension, I suppose that's a privilege, isn't it? So, as we've been discussing, the Convention of the North, as it's called, that is in Manchester today, after money was awarded by the government to various projects last week, with Michael Gove, Lisa Nandy and other key regional figures speaking about levelling up in the north of England.
Well, ahead of that conference today, our reporter Sophie Reaper has been meeting people in the region.
The phrase levelling up has always been controversial. Originally part of the Conservative Party's 2019 manifesto, the idea is to close the gap between the South East and less prosperous areas of the UK.
It's simply wrong that individuals in communities in the North and the Midlands have limited life chances and fewer opportunities than those in London and the South East.
One part of levelling up is, of course, improving regional infrastructure. For that, the construction industry requires support, but are they getting what they need?
I would like to see more people come into the industry with a higher level of skill and training. I'd like to see more women in the industry. I'd like to have our industry reflect the wider society. So not quite yet. It's early days, and to actually change the amount of people that come into our industry will take a significant amount of time.
Last year, the government set out 12 levelling up missions to achieve by 2030. Just one of those was to significantly increase the number of people with high-quality skills training in each region. I asked Sean what he made of the government's progress.
I actually think the distribution of what the government spends in the construction industry needs to be more even. So we need to improve our infrastructure. That would include hospitals, roads, homes, education. We need more money invested in those areas.
Last week, the North received £583.1 million in order to level up. But with both the North East and Yorkshire and Humber receiving less money than London, questions have been asked about just how fairly that money has been divided.
Right, so...
When asked, this is what the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, had to say.
What we're doing is investing in local communities across the country. Levelling up is about making sure people feel pride in the places they call home. It's about driving jobs and investment. That's what we're doing.
Huge investments have been made across the north of England, including £50 million for a new Northern Eden project in Morecambe and £20 million for a quayside regeneration in Gateshead. But do the people of the north feel they will actually benefit as a result? Do you think you've benefited from levelling up?
No. Yeah, they may have put some in Morecambe, 50 million, but that's to build a brand new thing that isn't there at the minute.
Well, the government need to start caring, not just the government, local authorities as well. Because we run a food bank here, we're basically giving free food away, and we've got a lot of families struggling, and people actually willing to considering to take their own lives because they're struggling. That's not levelling up to me.
It just depends. If they put it in education and they put it in NHS, yeah, I would have benefited, but I don't think I benefited.
It's clear that money is definitely being invested here in the north of England, but only time will tell whether it will actually lead to levelling up. Sophie Reaper, GB News.
You know, if you're watching that and you are from the north, you find it quite patronising that it's talked as if, you know, you might as well be Afghanistan or something, you know, you're somewhere miles away, detached from civilization or whatever. I spent, 7 years of my life living in Manchester. One of my sons lives in Manchester. My eldest boy was born in Manchester. So much history associated with Manchester. And I feel Manchester as a very natural place. You know, it's like, I dare say, like, you know, Belfast is my home. London is where I work. Manchester's where I would choose to live. But I could live in Yorkshire. Okay. I could live in Scotland.
I could live in Scotland any day, yeah.
There's so many places, so many beautiful places.
I could live in the southwest. I'd love to live in Devon.
Yes.
Near the seaside.
Yeah.
But we're stuck.
The thing is, what we're thinking of is the lack of train links, the lack of jobs, employment opportunities, whatever, outside London. I mean, why do most people live in London? For work.
Well, though, we were talking yesterday about how there is a huge amount of deprivation, of course, in the capital. And, you know, people who are struggling to fill jobs in the hospitality industry, waiters and waitresses earning, 22 grand a year, they can't afford the rents in London anymore. So many problems across the country, up and down.
But you see, this is it. We talk about paying conditions and people say, oh, don't give the nurses pay and don't give the firemen pay and the post workers pay and whatever.
How do they live?
How do they live? How do they do that job and live in London? Because London, people are crammed in like rats in London. I was just looking at apartment blocks, what they sell for 600,000 and 700,000. I mean,
postage stamp.
Top of each other, postage stamps, and the amount of, God, it's just like people on top of people. It's not a quality of life what people settle for. But I do think generally when you look at, you know, what government has to do, and it's a difficult task, and I would not be a politician. I wouldn't want that job. But you know what? I think it could do it better than a lot of them could. And you just have to say the truth, and you've got to say, why can't they come out and say, look, the country's broke, so we're going to have to tax you more. We're going to have to squeeze you until the pips hurt. There's a lot of people who would say, yeah, I'm very happy to pay more in tax. I'm very happy to do this or that. Give people a say in what they want. And people talk about dumping HS2 and whatever it is. We need HS2 and we need more. We need an east to west link right across the country, in England as well. Goodness knows what we need in Scotland, what we need in Wales, what we need in Northern Ireland. The whole situation is dire.
It's depressing.
Yeah, surely any of us could make a better job at running the country than what we've been given for the past 20 years or so. 6:20 is the time. Just putting that out there to give you a bit of conversation. Get in touch with us. Here are the rest of today's stories.
The United States and Germany are reportedly planning to send tanks to Ukraine. The US president's preparing to announce plans to send at least 30 tanks, whilst the German chancellor has decided he'll send at least 14 in a historic move.
14-year-old boy has been arrested after a teenage girl was stabbed at a school in Manchester. Officers arrived at Powers Wood High School yesterday afternoon. The girl was taken to hospital for treatment. Her injuries are said to be serious but not life-threatening. Police are appealing for information.
Scottish teachers are halfway through their 16-day strike action. Staff in both South Ayrshire and Edinburgh will walk out today. The unions claim the Scottish Government have little or no interest in resolving the dispute, but the government says their pay demands are not affordable.
Right, so Scottish Government says the teachers' pay is not affordable, and they're probably right. But what is affordable? Why? We're very good in this country at paying money out. What we're not good at, you could move anybody into a company and say, make cuts, make redundancies, make savings. How do you generate wealth? We put that out to you and say, how do you generate? Some of it is quite unappealing nowadays, but we could become Saudi Arabia or Texas if we fracked. And a lot of people would say, no, but this is the alternative. We're all going to hell in a handcart because there's no money in this country. So we could be quite rich if we fracked. But would that just be the end of the world, as it were? What way can you actually get the country to make money? I would put a penny on every text that people send.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Isn't it? Because they're unnecessary, they're a luxury, you don't need to do it. Telecommunications companies make fortunes out of it. Tax texts.
Is that including WhatsApps? Because I send thousands of WhatsApps and very few texts. Perhaps one text a month.
WhatsApp's sort of free, isn't it?
Yeah, so...
Yeah, it could be any way to generate.
Yeah, let us know your ideas this morning. How would you go for growth? What would be your advice to the Chancellor? Although I'm sure he's got lots of very clever people around him trying to make suggestions, but it seems as though not enough.
We just need to make money. Make money. Now, have you got a little quiz for me?
No.
No, you don't.
Well, we are asking what makes a narcissist after the break.
Are we?
And I have to say, in this industry, we have both met and worked with.
Oh, we better
not
get
naming any names.
We better get it.
A few.
But is it a bad thing to be a narcissist?
Yes.
We must
it's
get
a bad thing. 100%
listen,
a bad
let's
thing.
go to the break, and then what we'll do is we will come back with the definition of a narcissist. Okay. Are you one? Is it a bad thing?
Do you know one?
We'll be finding out after the weather forecast.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest broadcast from the Met Office. Well, a change today. We've got a band of rain pushing south across the UK. Brighter skies following, still rather chilly, particularly across the southern England. Taking a look at the bigger picture, this is that weather front which is bringing the rain slowly slipping its way southwards as we go through the day. However, high pressure nearby, meaning this weather front is largely on the weak side and shouldn't cause any issues. Cloudy start though this morning, still some mist and fog patches first thing, freezing in places too. This band of rain across Northern Ireland, southern Scotland, slowly slipping southwards as we go through the day. Brighter skies following though, but also scattering of showers, increasing winds across northern Scotland here too. Staying cloudy across southern England through the day, some places staying dry but still cold, 6 or 7 at best. Feeling fresher across northern Scotland, Northern Ireland and northern England too, where here temperatures reach 15, 16 degrees across northern parts of Scotland. Through into the evening time, that rain continues to clear southwards, so we'll see starry skies for many, 1 or 2 showers possible down the east coast as we head into the early hours. But with those clear skies, we will see a frost developing as temperatures fall down to 2 or 3 degrees in places, so a patchy frost to start Thursday morning. But a dry start for many, some sunshine, particularly across the west, and the east seeing a little bit more cloud as we go through the day. With a northerly breeze, we will see a few showers moving down the east coast at times, but lots of places staying dry, the best of the unbroken sunshine further west you are, and a fresher feeling day for everyone. Temperatures generally around average. They're in the sunshine, not feeling too bad. Highs around 8 or 9 degrees across some exposed western coasts. As we head then through towards the end of the week and into the weekend, high pressure always nearby, so it generally stays dry. The cloud will come and go at times. The risk of a little light rain, particularly across the northwest, and temperatures generally around average. See you again soon.
It's approaching 8:30. Very good to have you on board, Eamonn and Isabel, here on a Wednesday morning. This is Breakfast on GB News.
At 7:15, we will be talking blockbusters and Bill Nighy as Kinsey Schofield breaks down the Oscar nominations live from LA.
And as the New Zealand President, Jacinda Ardern, steps down due to burnout, we're going to find out more about the whole condition of burnout. Have you suffered from it? What you can do to stop it happening to you? I think a very brave decision from her, very good, very honest of her doing that. And I do think, you know, politicians, they are on show, they are available 24 hours a day practically. You imagine going to bed knowing that you're going to be grilled by you first thing the next morning. You know, a politician going to bed and thinking she or he has got Isabel Webster at 10 to 7 in the morning.
They wouldn't care. But to be fair, they do have to. We've just had crisis after crisis all around the world, haven't we? And just the riding on your adrenaline glands in that way, kind of permanent state of heightened
They don't help themselves.
anxiety.
I mean, listen, I genuinely of the opinion I would talk and listen to what a politician has to say until I realise they're talking nonsense, they're avoiding the question, or they just don't believe what they're saying. And sometimes I think it's not so much them, it's the awful system that we have that means that they've got to dodge questions or whatever. And the media and the press have
Play
a big
role in it,
role in
absolutely.
all of this as well. But, you know, why can't they just be more straight talking in all of this? Again, we're giving you a lot to discuss today, aren't we? GBviews at gbnews.uk or whatever other ways you can do it by the Twitter sphere or whatever.
Right, we are talking narcissism. What is a narcissist? Are you one? And for many, the word conjures up images of infamous individuals
Wait a minute,
with an
Isabel, wait a
inflated
minute.
sense of
Wait a-
their own
Yeah,
importance.
I've got to tell you what a narcissist is. A narcissist is a person, according to the Oxford Dictionary, a person who has an excessive interest in or admiration of themselves, right? Does that ring a bell? So basically, you're not interested in anybody else. You're only really interested in yourself first, okay? So we have to ask you to be honest about that. Are you a narcissist, or maybe you just have self-belief, high esteem?
Yeah, self-confidence. Yeah, you've been brought up to
Self-confidence.
believe in yourself.
Yeah.
What's the difference? Well, let's speak
Would it
to
be worse not to
professional
be a
on this.
narcissist, you know, not to have confidence
I
in
think,
yourself?
well, you can have confidence, I think, probably without being a narcissist. Let's find out from a professional psychologist, Dr. Carmen Hara, who's here to tell us what the trademark symptoms are. I mean, how do you distinguish between somebody who's been brought up to have a great sense of confidence and someone who's actually a manipulative narcissist?
So a narcissist is somebody who crosses the boundaries from empowerment into entitlement. He doesn't necessarily have to suffer from NPD, which is narcissistic personality disorder, which is a mental disorder. But we see narcissists everywhere around us, and they have a excessive inflated ego. They operate on their ego, and they treat people with disrespect. They treat people without caring. They have little humility. And as the dictionary says, they all care is about self. They are the center of the attention. It usually comes from the fact that they have a lot of insecurities, insecurities that might go back to their youth and to all kinds of personality disorders like inferiority complex that they usually have. Consequently, a narcissist wants to be loved, wants to be adored, wants to be flattered all the time. He needs to be the best. He needs to be the center of attention. And he needs everybody to applaud them. And people, if they don't do that, then the narcissist will play the victim card. And he will blame the people around them. So the legend says that Narcissus was somebody who saw himself in the water and loved himself so much that he turned into a flower. Now the narcissists today, they don't turn into plants. They do exist around us everywhere you turn. And you have to make a difference between the personality traits of a narcissist and somebody who appreciates himself, who has love for himself, who has a very high self-esteem.
Let me ask you, Carmen. Carmen, I want you to rule on this. Last year, I've been called a narcissist.
You haven't.
I have.
That's awful.
By my own children, right? And they're in their 30s, right? So there was I last year going to Royal Ascot, sitting in traffic, the traffic not moving, and down the road comes about 15 ladies, right? middle-aged ladies who...
I can actually see this scenario.
Who were a bit worse for wear. They were a bit... It was 11 o'clock in the morning and they were enjoying life, shall we say, right? Oof. And so the traffic wasn't moving, they weren't moving, and I rolled down the window of my car and I said, "Girls, do you want a picture?" And they said, "Oh, my God, it's him." And I said, "Yes, George Clooney here." And I got out and I got a picture taken with them, right? And I got into my car and my kids said to me, as I say, they're in their 30s, "Dad, you are such a narcissist. That was so embarrassing." Whereas I just thought I was bringing joy to these women, right?
Exactly.
So does that make me a narcissist?
No, a narcissist will manipulate. A narcissist is actually somebody who, wants to do everything in his favor. Well, you haven't done anything wrong. You just introduced himself trying to make people happy, bring excitement. So that you have high self-esteem, that's normal, and that's a good trait of character. So
well, we've got a couple of questions for the listeners and the viewers to think about. So Isabel, right, hit me with one of these questions.
Are you proud of yourself because you are unique and irreplaceable?
Oh no, I wouldn't.
Yes, you are.
No.
You know you're unique. You're Eamonn Holmes.
What?
There's only one Eamonn Holmes as well, you know.
Well, do you think if I wasn't here presenting this programme, it would go down the tubes?
Yes.
Probably, yeah. Anyway, do you believe you deserve to be loved, Isabel? Because it is something in you that no one else has.
I do believe I deserve to be loved, yes.
Is there something in you that no one else has?
Yes.
Ooh.
Yes, but I don't think that makes me manipulative.
OK,
I think it makes me unique.
Well, if the answer to those questions, I say here, is yes, you may be a narcissist. But you see, Carmen, what I find strange about all of this, society talks about how people don't believe in themselves and their mental health issues and whatever. And I look at narcissism and I think there's a lot of it that surely we should be encouraging. It's better to have that quality than not to have a belief in yourself, surely.
It's very significant to have belief in yourself. It's very important to build yourself, to create the best version of yourself. It's very significant to love yourself. The society encourages us to love ourselves, to treat ourselves with respect, because that's the way other people are going to treat us. But when you're a narcissist, then you put yourself first and you very disrespectful and manipulative and dominate situation and try to control people in your life. Somebody who's controlling displays the personality traits of a narcissist. So there's a world of a difference between one and the other. That's why I created that quiz for people to distinguish what it is to have a very high self-esteem like you guys have versus being a narcissist. It's a difference.
I ask one final question, and I just have a personal theory that the rise of social media is creating a whole new generation of narcissists, because people can kind of see themselves constantly put videos to music. Their whole grid is all about themselves, where they're going, what they're doing, totally obsessed by their own story, which is quite frankly really boring mostly. But don't you think I worry that my kids are just going to spend hours gazing at their navels, when actually generations ago people were trying to think about community and each other and doing the right thing and all that. I sound all on my high horse again, but I do think we're going down the drain with social media.
I agree with you. When people in social media display that what they have, what they possess, they put first, their personality traits in a negative way. And it's all about them, that's definitely a tendency toward narcissism. If you're in social media trying to help other people, coming up with ideas, with projects, trying to teach the world something that you know best, that's different. So here where social media is instrumental in promoting good versus social media that allows people to become narcissists.
Carmen, fascinating talking to you, but it's not all about you, Carmen. We've got to move on and talk about other things on the program. On the program today.
Not about me at all.
Lovely talking to you,
Doctor. I just want to promote the good and be a teacher.
Good. Dr. Carmen is a psychologist and an author. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Well-known, famous narcissists are Donald Trump.
Oh, 100%.
Kanye West.
Oh, absolutely.
Madonna.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Oh, yes. Let us know any other high-profile narcissists that you can think of. Name and shame them. We're going to take a break. After that, we're back with David Mellor and Scarlett Maguire to take you through your Wednesday morning newspapers. See you in a moment.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Welcome back.
Here comes the papers.
7.
Yeah. And
Should we do the front pages?
What?
Should we kick off with the front pages?
Yeah, no, why waste of time? Forget all that. No, we're not doing that. We're getting straight into the conversation. We've got Scarlett Maguire and we've got David Mellor here. David, first of all, this business of tanks to the Ukraine. I mean, it really is quite pathetic. We'll send you 7, we'll send you 14, we'll send you... What the heck is going on? Will it make any difference, or is it all tokenism?
Oh, I think if they get up to 200, I think it'll make a lot of difference. I think it also means that the Germans, the interesting thing about German politicians I used to find, they were terribly suave, spoke great English, but actually when you look at Germany, they either produce a Hitler or they produce a wuss like this current chancellor. They don't seem able to steer a safe course where you feel.
We are leaving out Merkel in that lot.
You've got well. Anyway,
what are you going to say about her?
But
she's got us all in this massive energy crisis, doesn't she? By wedding us to Russia.
And she was the one, because of course she was brought up in East Germany, which was of course just a.
Well, there's lots of people who say that actually Putin calculated his invasion of Ukraine for exactly the minute she retired, because he knew he wouldn't have been able to while she was there, because she was able to cross into Russian psyche and speak Russian, having grown up in East Germany.
Anyway, the suggestion in the Daily Telegraph, hammer blow for Putin as Ukraine gets tanks. I think it will make a lot of difference. But the agony of trying to get there, and the fact that, the Germans have proved once again to be very unreliable allies, and that's a shame.
Well, the amazing thing about the Germans, I just want to say, is that they have historically built the best tanks ever created. The British built the first tanks, the Russians then developed them, the Germans stole all the Russian plans for tanks and then created the Panther tank and various aspects of that. And the irony is, they're so far ahead in the technology for all of that, and yet they don't. What do they use them for? What would they be used for?
They used to be used for invading other countries, and now they can't even use them to defend a country.
But David, the thing is that Germany, like Japan, I mean, they still suffer from the Second World War, and they don't want to be seen. I mean, so they don't want to have warring relations, and they are trying to find. In the end, the Ukraine war will finish, and we will have to sort out a relationship with Putin. Well, or with any luck, somebody else in Russia. And I think that's what they're thinking about. Is they're actually thinking ahead about. Because they're assuming that actually Ukraine, will go on fighting.
Yeah, I mean, it is the first time that German tanks will be in a theatre of war.
Precisely.
And for well-documented reasons. We understand why there has been reticence all this time, and aren't we glad of that they've been slow to militarise in the wake?
Well, I mean, I remember when after the wall came down and Germany became, rather than East and West, just Germany. And people were saying, this is terrible, Germany's going to invade other countries. I mean, actually, as you say, they've made sure that that's not the Germany that we see.
And so we end up with the Russians having a stranglehold over a whole lot energy policy.
Yes.
There was no easy escape by Germany becoming soft. And one of those, by the way, who thought that a united Germany would mean a return to that kind of situation was Mrs. Thatcher, who was strongly against a united Germany.
Yeah. Right, Scarlett, let's go to the Metro front page here, and we're talking about this big Levelling Up conference which is going up, which is happening in Manchester today.
Well, I mean, this is a terrible story, and unfortunately, we've watched it play out. And the story is that actually, if you look at if you look at the north, it's like Greece. I mean, among OECD countries, it's sort of nothing, and you just say, so, Boris Johnson got in 2019 by saying we're going to level up, and he has done nothing. I mean...
So is that a lie? Is that incompetence? Why has nothing happened?
Well, how would I know? I mean, Boris is not known for telling the truth. I mean, he's known for being very...
What a calumny. How could you wash your mouth out with carbonic acid?
It's saying what he wants to be true. So he said, we have a social
pillar of
plan.
Integrity.
And
it's
really serious because, you look at the rail services, right? You can get to London. As long as you go quite early, you can't get across the country.
Can't get from Leeds to Liverpool and...
No, and you try going on the Trans-Pennine. I mean, it's a tiny little thing. It is, and then 1 in 10 buses have been. I mean, this is all over the country, but 1 in 10 buses have been shelved in the last 12 months. I mean, actually, for a lot of people, buses are the only way they've got around. I mean, I think, and we were promised 40 hospitals. I mean, obviously, a hospital meant a car park or a little bit of extra. We never got near it. And I mean, if I lived up north, I would be very cross because nothing has moved.
But Scarlett, we were talking earlier, when we say up north and levelling up, but we also mean southwest, southeast, because you're just outside London. I mean, it's not just up north we're talking about. If you talk about Bristol, or you talk about Plymouth, or you talk about Norwich or whatever, this has to apply to them as well.
I think it's worse. I think it's worse up north, actually. It's worse. I mean, you look at the southwest, and you've got lots of big universities. You've got a lot of things. But I mean, so the levelling up funds, who had the most? London. I mean, it's incredible. I mean, and of course, there's incredible deprivation in London. But actually, as far as infrastructure goes, we're fine.
OK. Let's talk about Nadhim Zahawi, shall we, David? This is inside the Times, and it's talking about how 2 prime ministers were kept in the dark. Because, of course, when somebody's appointed to the cabinet, there have to be due diligence checks on their background. And he was approved, he was cleared to be in the cabinet. So is this a failing of the Cabinet Office? Or indeed, is it Simon Case who's been...
Well, he doesn't... Simon Case seems to be in the middle of almost every cock-up. And perhaps it's time he went and did a job more suited to his talents. And I'll give him the teapot and... suggest he gets on with it. But the reality is that, I've known Nadeem Zahawi for more than 30 years. I like Nadeem Zahawi. I admire him, a man of great business sense. I remember many years ago, he came to me and said, look, I've got this new T-shirt. And you put the T-shirt on, and when you got hot, it changed colour.
All right.
He's a born entrepreneur. What worries me for Nadeem is that it's now open season on him. There are all kinds of stories in the papers, including one about him buying a house in the country, but not when he shouldn't have been occupying it, because it's supposed to be occupied by people who are engaged in rural businesses. And I just think if I were able to fight my way through all these clever young people who, having ruined the life of Boris Johnson, were now very keen to ruin the life of him, I would say there comes a moment when you just want to gracefully step aside, sort everything out, and then come back. Just once you are the prime suspect for newspapers to go to try to destroy a career, I think it's very difficult for him.
Because Scarlett, it was interesting. Caroline Noakes has come out saying, she's a Conservative MP, saying you need to create some space, mate. I understand whether or not you're guilty or not. It's a distraction. And yet I looked on Twitter yesterday, Nadeem Zahawi trying to tweet about government business, trying to pretend that this wasn't going on, and all the replies were about his tax situation.
That's right.
And it just is impossible to continue in that role until this is sorted, surely.
That's his impossibility, you see. If he was doing a job, he was Minister of Latrines, and all he was doing was messing around with latrines and then making the occasional intervention on other things, that might be all right. But he is the points man for the government across the whole range of politically contentious issues. And he can't give an interview about anything without it being something else being brought up. And that's why, as a Nadeem fan, not as a Nadeem critic...
And there are a lot of them.
There are a lot of them. I would say, just step aside.
But also,
life's a long game.
David, you blame Simon Case, but actually, Nadeem should have said to both Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak, look, I've got a little problem with my tax, you'd better know about it. I mean, you have to say to people, is there anything...
Well, we don't know whether he did or he didn't, of course.
We do know, what we know is that he paid a penalty. He paid a fine of over £1 million for a careless error, right? We do know that. We know that he had a problem with his tax while he was Chancellor.
Sure,
right?
But what we also need to understand is that Nadeem Zahawi is a very successful entrepreneur and ran a very sizable business. YouGov created a very sizable business. People are approaching his taxpayer as if he was, employed by a company, like a lot of people who go into Parliament are. They're employed by a company and they pay, PAYE on what they earn. This is a much different situation, and there would be endless lawyers making a fortune out of trying to work out his tax affairs.
Guys, we've got to leave it there. We'll see you again in 45 minutes' time. David and Scarlett there, as we talk movies, we talk Oscars, and the nominees have been announced for this year's awards. Everything, Everywhere, All at Once leads the way. It has 11 nominations.
But it's our very own Bill Nighy, national treasure, that is leading British hopes. He's up for Best Actor. It is actually his first Academy Award, nod at the age of 73, and he plays an ageing civil servant in the film Living. And here's a little taste of that film.
Mr. Williams, a little on the frosty side, perhaps. Not too much fun and laughter. Rather like church.
How did it happen? Small wonder I didn't notice what I was becoming.
Dad, you all right?
If only to be alive for one day. But I realise that I don't know how.
Just love him. I just really feel like I know him. I like him. I think it's all the Richard Curtis movies he's been in over the years.
He's very accessible, it has to be said. I'm pinning my hopes on Colin Farrell for Ireland, though. And now let's get the views over in Los Angeles from Kinsey Schofield there this morning. Kinsey.
Some great British and Irish actresses and actors nominated. You've got Colin Farrell, Paul Mescal, Kerry Condon. So I think you guys, good luck to you, because I think you've got some pretty good competition.
Good. So I'm noticing this year, I mean, personally, I find the Oscars now vomit-making, basically, in their obvious wokeness and the dirge that we're expected to watch and enjoy. I'm hearing there's some hope that proper movies like Top Gun, Maverick, is up for nomination. And so it should be.
Well, that's right, because you're right. How often do we watch these award shows and they're artsy movies that no one actually purchased a ticket to go enjoy in a theater? This is the year of the blockbusters. You know, for movie of the year, you are getting Top Gun, you're getting Avatar. That's incredible too. And I don't know, Top Gun Maverick was really high up there, but for me, it's Elvis. Eamonn. Please, God, let Elvis take the top home, because I have seen that movie more times than I can count.
Have you? Have you seen Everything Everywhere All at Once? Because they've received 11 nominations, and I'm fascinated to know what it is about the movie that's, you know, captured imaginations.
No clue, Isabel, but I promise I will watch it for you. I'm more of an Elvis fan.
Okay, fair enough. I think that's certainly for us here in Britain. When the Oscar nominations come out, a lot of the films haven't even been released here. I mean, I'm terrible. I'm so behind on watching movies anyway. But I haven't seen hardly any of the ones that are up for nominations, have you?
Now, that usually happens. You don't really... They do all this publicity, and then in the UK, we then see
it makes it really hard for us to do the interviews, because we're like, no idea what these movies are. However...
But I tell you, I do know what a banshee is. Do you know what a banshee is, Kinsey?
I don't, but I heard you were going to ask me to pronounce it. And yes, I did think it was the Banshee of Ed Sheeran, not in Sheeran. So,
Kinsey, you are spot on. I don't understand why everybody's talking about the Banshees of Ed Sheeran. It's unbelievable. The word is Inisherin, meaning the island of Ireland, and I don't know why nobody can seem to pronounce it. But the interesting thing is, when I was about 5 or 6 years of age, I went to see a Disney film called Darby O'Gill and the Little People, and Sean Connery plays an Irishman in this. The scariest scene I have ever seen in my life, and to this day, is in a Disney film, Darby O'Gill. And it is about a banshee arriving with a hearse outside this home. Because if you hear a banshee in Irish folklore, if you hear a wailing outside your house, it means someone is going to die within that house. So it's the banshee, and a banshee is only a woman and bears a great physical resemblance to, say, you or Isabel, with long hair, a bit wild-looking. But a banshee, honestly, look up Darby O'Gill and the Little People, and the scariest thing you will ever see is the banshee coming to claim the dead inside the house. So when a banshee wails, it means someone in your home is going to die. But have you seen Banshees of Inisherin?
No, but I'm going to now. That sounds terrifying. And, you know, no one would ever accuse you of being boring, Eamonn. You've got a story for everything, and that's why I love you.
Thank you very much indeed. But that's got Brendan Gleeson and Colin Farrell in it. And it must be difficult for Brendan Gleeson, because Colin Farrell is the man who seems to be getting the attention.
That's right. Yeah. But, you know, I think we are ignoring the elephant in the room, which is that everybody is going to be talking. You know that Jimmy Kimmel is going to poke fun at the slap that rocked the world last Oscars. Jimmy Kimmel's stepping in as the host for the first time since 2018. I do anticipate he's going to tease the audience about the Will Smith slap. Chris Rock was offered the role as host, but he actually turned it down. And we're hearing that Will Smith is devastated that he was not nominated for Emancipation. He was also ignored during the Golden Globes for his role in Emancipation. They thought this was going to be his big comeback. And while he did resign from the Oscars, he was banned for 10 years from attending. He was still in the position to be nominated. So obviously Hollywood has yet to forgive him for that slap.
Yeah, I'll never forget that. Honestly, I remember coming into work and just everyone was watching we couldn't believe what we were seeing. It really was shocking, genuinely shocking. Well, look, lots to look forward to. When are the actual Oscars? When's the big day?
March 12th. So hopefully I will see you then.
Yes, we'll see you before then when the red carpet is rolled out. We look forward to it. Kinsey, always a pleasure. Thank you.
Darby O'Gill and the Little People.
You've sent me a clip of that before.
Did I?
Yeah, you sent me a clip of that. And,
that is the scariest thing. Do you talk
How old
about,
were you?
Probably 4 or 5.
Oh, right.
You talk about child abuse, you know?
That was child abuse.
You're brought to see
And you
that.
were brought up in the Troubles, and that was scarier.
Disney film, a
Yeah,
Disney
unbelievable.
film. Look it up. If you've seen it, let us know all about it. We're back after the break.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back.
Eamonn Holmes back on the TV
Surprised
with me this
you
morning.
even remember my
I
name.
know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes.
Oh, good.
Already to bless.
Oh, Eamonn. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamonn Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Every weekend, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Bigger and better, starting at 8 p.m. Friday and Saturday.
Can't be too safe. Bring it on. Has there ever been a more innuendo feature?
And Sundays, we're on at 9.
It's ridiculous. Just get on with it. Maybe you should get a proper job.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even some ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you
I'll
are.
put that as my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The government moves to raise the retirement age amid dire economic forecasts.
Hello there. 7 o'clock is the time. Wednesday, the 25th of January. Welcome aboard to Breakfast in GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. The Chancellor is reportedly planning to raise the retirement age to 68 in his budget in March. The move would raise billions for the Treasury, but will likely spark a backlash from older voters forced to push back their retirement plans.
Tax cuts are also likely to be ruled out in the budget, despite pressure from Conservative MPs. Treasury sources say the Chancellor was surprised by yesterday's 30-year spike in public borrowing.
The north of England's being badly neglected by the government, a new report has claimed. It comes ahead of a speech by the Levelling Up Secretary Michael Gove at a meeting of business leaders in Manchester today.
And the actor Bill Nighy leads English hopes at the Academy Awards after his performance in Living secured him his first Oscar nod at the age of 73. The sci-fi comedy Everything Everywhere All at Once clinched the most nominations with 11.
So we're starting with the economy this morning. The Chancellor is reportedly drawing up plans to raise the state pension age to 68 in his March budget. That would bring it forward 11 years earlier than planned.
Of course, this is to raise billions of pounds for the Treasury, but would risk backlash from older voters forced to push back their retirement plans.
Well, economists forecasts an even deeper recession than previously thought, and borrowing is reaching a new 30-year high.
Well, joining us now, the head of digital news here at GB News, and that is journalist Dan Falvey. Dan, you've been doing some polling on this. What have you found out?
Well, what we know is that people have been seeing their taxes going up, they're seeing interest rates go up, and now we're talking about the state pension rates go up. So we asked our viewers, what do they think? Do they think that the Tories are still the party that reward hard work? And 91% of people said no. So that shows you, I think, just how strongly people across the country feel right now about this. People feel like they're not getting their fair share from this government.
And that would explain why, when it's being suggested in Cabinet, this raise of the pension age, there is a split, if the reports are to be believed, that it's not going to be an easy sell to Conservative Cabinet members and indeed backbenchers.
Yes, and I think the government will say that there is no final decision on this. There is still a review ongoing, but what we understand from the papers is that despite this ongoing review, that actually the Chancellor's already made up his mind, and whatever that review says, he's going to come out and say that in the 2030s, probably 2035, that the age would raise to 68, which is much sooner than was expected.
Why would he need to say that? Is that to settle nerves in the city? Because obviously it's electoral suicide. They're not going to implement it before the next general election. So why say it at all?
Well, these sort of things, you need to give people time before you do it. You're not allowed to do it until at least there's got to be 10 years' notice in order to give people of working age notice about this happening, and therefore there is a time limit on this. If you're going to do it, it has to be announced sooner rather than later. And obviously, next year, 2024 election, you'd have to have it implemented by 2025. You plan to do it by 2035.
Yeah, what I find hard to believe is you've got the Chancellor of the Exchequer expressing surprise at the amount of borrowing the country has actually undertaken. How can he be surprised? Surely he should be, monitoring that almost every day.
Yeah, and I think that will worry a lot of people, that he is the man with the books, he's the man with the figures, and that he's shocked at just how high the borrowing is. We all know that the borrowing is extraordinary and just a massive amount, and I think that is concerning for some people. But I think what's also concerning is the fact that the OBR, who have looked into these figures and said we got it wrong before, I think there'll be a lot of concern that they got this wrong. These are the people who we rely on to say whether our budgets that our politicians set, whether they're responsible or not. And if they can't get the figures right themselves, how can we trust them to
Right. And
say
so
that the
they're
budget's
saying
right?
there's a £9.2 billion black hole, and they're revising down their forecasts as a result, which is a huge blow for the Chancellor and for his economic plans. At the front of the Daily Mail this morning, obviously a Tory paper or a right-leaning paper, time that Sunak went for growth. And we've been asking our viewers, how can we get this country back on its feet? I mean, obviously the Truss policy was very much going for growth, Trussonomics, but that was a disaster. So how do they get out of this, think of a better word, black hole?
Well, I think what Rishi Sunak had said was that we're going to have to tighten our belts in the short term, but then we'll introduce tax cuts in the longer term, and this will help the economy grow going forwards. He said, we need to get inflation down and then we can focus on the growth. But that's a hard pill for people to swallow when they're looking at, as I said, tax rises, interest rate rises, state pension rate rising. It just feels like bad news after bad news for hard-working people.
Has he got any wriggle room in the 2 years or so before the next general election? It's not a lot of time. It's not a lot of time to make any dent into that £2.5 trillion deficit that we've got there. But it does implant in people's mind, as your poll points out there, that their hard work is not being rewarded, that they don't see there's any benefit under this present Conservative government. Is he sleepwalking into guaranteed electoral defeat?
And that is certainly what Conservative backbenchers fear. And the problem is, for all of Rishi Sunak's short-term pain for long-term gain, when you go into the next election, you can say to people, look, we can now go for growth. And they'll say, well, why should we believe you? We believed you last time round, and look what you did to us that time.
Do you think if he could turn back the clock, that he would introduce all that eating out business and all the COVID compensation that came people's way? Because that's responsible for a pretty big chunk of this figure.
I think he would say that actually, yes, because of the times that we were in, they were still necessary. And even though the Eat Out to Help Out scheme, I think people have decided wasn't actually, in hindsight, the best thing to do, I think the public are forgiving of individual policy errors during COVID because it was an unprecedented pandemic. I think when you put them all together and this continued error after error, the problems caused by the Liz Truss budget as well, etc., I think they go, you know what, quite frankly, we're a bit sick of this.
And I suppose it brings up the whole topic of the NHS and the future of it when we're talking about raising the pension age, partly because people are living well into their 80s and 90s and they're getting everything for free from birth to death when it comes to healthcare. We want to keep that as long as we possibly can, but with people living longer, the cost of that is astronomical.
And I don't think we've seen this has been a problem, a growing problem for a number of years. I don't think we're seeing politicians being honest with the public about this. How do we pay for it? We saw with Boris Johnson that he promised he was going to come up with his social care plan. At the same time, said he wasn't going to increase national insurance, and then he had to backtrack and said the only way to fund it was the national insurance rise. That did go when Liz Truss was in charge, but we haven't therefore seen a long-term funding plan put in place, and that is the problem. I don't think the politicians are being honest with the public about the difficult choices that are facing the country right now.
The public are talking to us through GB Views today. Valerie says waste in the NHS should be cut. I mean, it's always easier said than done. Tony says, personally, I believe the cost of the NHS is unsustainable. I also think that a charge should be made to visit a GP. And Calvin says, I would consider cutting VAT for businesses in order to promote growth and ultimately ensure business survival. That's people's views on that. This Levelling Up forum that's taking place in Manchester today, what credibility has that got? Because, you know, a couple of years have passed since the promises made to people in the red wall voting areas. Nothing has happened.
So this Convention of the North is when all the Northern mayors, the Levelling Up Secretary, Labour's Shadow Levelling Up Secretary, they all get together and they discuss about what they want to do for the North. And exactly what you just said there is a feeling that there is no credibility when it comes to levelling up. And the Northern mayors are demanding now that the government write it into law that they have to get better funding deals, that written into law, they have to get similar funding to what the South gets. And this is a model that was done in Germany after the unification for East Germany and West Germany. I think it tells you quite the state of something, though, when you've got Northern mayors saying, actually, we don't trust you. We want this now to be required by law. And this was a proposal that actually was come up with by Andy Street, the Conservative mayor for the Midlands.
That has a bit of credibility to it. I mean, when I look and you know, Michael Gove will talk today about aquariums being built here and all sorts of weird and strange things. I mean, that's not really my idea of levelling up, you know, to put a theme park or an aquarium somewhere, whatever. I mean, yes, it's nice and it happens, but surely levelling up means investing in infrastructure, railways, roads, services, creating employment, creating factories. Surely that's what levelling up means.
I think the public would agree with you. And some of the funding that came out last week when they gave money to different local areas for so-called levelling up, some of it seemed, quite frankly, a bit bonkers. And Rishi Sunak admitted last week in a speech, we seem to be branding everything as levelling up. But they keep doing it, and I think the public will be absolutely with you on that, that this is, quite frankly, you know, we want better infrastructure.
OK, Dan.
Falvey, thank you very much. Look, whilst we discuss this Convention of the North that's taking place in Manchester, our reporter, Sophie Reaper, has been out and about talking to people in the region to get their views on the whole situation.
The phrase levelling up has always been controversial. Originally part of the Conservative Party's 2019 manifesto, the idea is to close the gap between the South East and less prosperous areas of the UK.
It's simply wrong that individuals in communities in the North and the Midlands have limited life chances and fewer opportunities than those in London and the South East.
One part of levelling up is, of course, improving regional infrastructure. For that, the construction industry requires support, but are they getting what they need?
I would like to see more people come into the industry with a higher level of skill and training. I'd like to see more women in the industry. I'd like to have our industry reflect the wider society. So not quite yet. It's early days, and to actually change the amount of people that come into our industry will take a significant amount of time.
Last year, the government set out 12 levelling up missions to achieve by 2030. Just one of those was to significantly increase the number of people with high-quality skills training in each region. I asked Sean what he made of the government's progress.
I actually think the distribution of what the government spends in the construction industry needs to be more even. So we need to improve our infrastructure. That would include hospitals, roads, homes, education. We need more money invested in those areas.
Last week, the North received £583.1 million in order to level up. But with both the North East and Yorkshire and Humber receiving less money than London, questions have been asked about just how fairly that money has been divided.
Right, so...
When asked, this is what the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, had to say.
What we're doing is investing in local communities across the country. Levelling Up is about making sure people feel pride in the places they call home. It's about driving jobs and investment. That's what we're doing.
Huge investments have been made across the north of England, including £50 million for a new Northern Eden project in Morecambe and £20 million for a quayside regeneration in Gateshead. But do the people of the north feel they will actually benefit as a result? Do you think you've benefited from Levelling Up?
No. Yeah, they may have put some in Morecambe, 50 million, but that's to build a brand new thing that isn't there at the minute.
Well, the government need to start caring, not just the government, local authorities as well. Because we run a food bank here. We're basically giving free food away, and we've got a lot of families struggling, and people actually willing to considering to take their own lives because they're struggling. That's not levelling up to me.
It just depends. If they put it in education and they put it in NHS, yeah, I would have benefited. But I don't think I benefited.
It's clear that money is definitely being invested here in the north of England, but only time will tell whether it will actually lead to levelling up. Sophie Reaper, GB News.
Thank you, Sophie. The time, 13 minutes past the hour. Let's bring you up to date with what else is happening.
The United States and Germany are reportedly planning to send tanks to Ukraine. The US President is preparing to announce plans to send at least 30 tanks, whilst the German Chancellor has decided to send at least 14 in a historic move.
A 14-year-old boy has been arrested after a teenage girl was stabbed at a school in Manchester. Officers arrived at Parswood High yesterday afternoon. The girl was taken to hospital for treatment. Her injuries are said to be serious, but not life-threatening. Police are appealing for information.
Scottish teachers are halfway through their 16-day strike action. Staff in both South Ayrshire and Edinburgh will walk out today. The unions claim the Scottish Government have little or no interest in resolving the dispute. The government says the pay demands are not affordable.
Amazon workers are staging their first ever strike in Britain in a dispute over pay.
There have been lots of these in the States, but it's the first of its kind here, and the walkout is due to take place from the e-commerce giant's Coventry warehouse and is also in protest of poor management and long working hours.
Well, let's go live to Coventry. Our West Midlands reporter Jack Carson will tell you more. Jack, good morning to you.
Well, good morning and welcome to Coventry, where all the attention today is on this Amazon warehouse here, as for the first time GMB union members here walk out here in the UK from Amazon. I'm joined now by Stuart Richards, who's a senior organiser for the GMB. Tell me about why the members here today have decided to strike.
It's taken quite a long time to get here. So back in August last year, we had a situation where spontaneous protests broke out, not only at Coventry, but other sites, just on the back of the fact that the workers had been through the pandemic. They'd worked all the way through it. They came out of that, inflation started to rocket, and they were offered a 50% rise, which they were incredibly unhappy with. So we've been supporting them from then on, trying to get Amazon bosses to actually talk to us, trying to actually get some kind of negotiation to listen to their concerns. That hasn't happened. So now we're at the point where Amazon workers have had enough. We're taking strike action.
How significant is the impact of this strike going to be, and the fact that it is the first time that UK workers for Amazon have taken that industrial action?
Yeah, like you say, this is the first strike at an Amazon warehouse in the whole of the UK. And again, you look around at the security bits, you can see the response that Amazon has in terms of trade unions. They are really not a trade union friendly organisation. To get to this point is hugely significant, and hopefully it marks a sea change for these workers, so we can actually start to get them better organised and actually trying to fight for decent paying conditions.
It started here in Coventry. Is this industrial action that you think can spread across the UK? And could we see more Amazon workers across the UK taking the same action?
So our Amazon workers here have their own branch, which encompasses lots of different Amazon warehouses, lots of different workers from those warehouses, and we're seeing a huge amount of interest from those workers in what's happening here. Those workers have the same issues. They have the same shared unhappiness about the fact that they're being paid really incredibly badly by a multi-million-pound profit-making company. So we think that it's likely that these disputes are going to spread if Amazon doesn't talk to us.
And we've seen a lot of strike action within the public sector. This is now private sector. What do you think that says about the temperature of how people are feeling across the country with their pay?
Well, the issues that these workers face are no different to those workers in the public sector. Again, we've got an employer that has paid them badly for a significant period of time, just like those workers in the public sector. They're experiencing the same cost of living crisis. They're struggling to feed their families. They're struggling to heat their homes. Those issues run across beyond Amazon.
OK, Stuart, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Now, Amazon say that they've that since 2018 there's been a 29% increase in their workers' pay, but Amazon workers here rejecting that 50p pay rise that they were offered and taking the industrial action today.
Jack, thank you very much indeed for bringing us up to date and giving us an insight into the pressures that those workers are facing, and indeed the same for all delivery workers, Royal Mail as well, under huge pressure. They're in the middle of their industrial action as well. But we are a society where we expect these things, we expect them on time. I mean, that's a job that I would hate to do. I mean, being timed between when you left off the last parcel, how long you've taken to do something. No wonder they chuck things over fences.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
you know, awful thing. I have a very bad confession to make. Yesterday, I was sitting in traffic in London and there was another delivery vehicle beside me. And it was a well-known and internationally known delivery vehicle, right? Very distinctive, very reputable company, whatever. And as I was sitting in traffic, the driver of this delivery van was watching TV. He had it locked on to his dashboard, and he was sitting, going through the traffic, you know, bit by bit, stopping, starting, watching his TV on his phone, whatever it was.
What did you do?
Well, I didn't do anything. And I thought I was going to take his number, and I thought, well, I'm a bit of a tout doing that, But I just thought, you know where you think, you would never think of doing that. You know what's wrong, so you wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
This guy obviously was really cocky, really confident, doing it, watching whatever he was watching. And he could have been saying, should I have taken a picture of him?
Probably, yeah. I believe it's a big thing amongst hauliers that they watch all sorts whilst they're driving, and you often hear about these stories when they're in the...
articulated lorries.
Yeah, and then they veer because they're sort of drifting off.
Yeah, and if they're foreign trucks and they're driving their left-hand drive,
they don't see you.
as opposed to right-hand drive, and they have their feet on the dashboard and all sorts of things. And like it's a job that eventually everybody wants robots to do, and that's why these people are having to strike or whatever, because just their employers are thinking, what an inconvenience humans are. We just want robots to do all of this. And robots wouldn't be watching the telly, would they, I suppose? But it's a boring job. I mean, it can be quite mundane and whatever, but you shouldn't be watching the TV as you...
That's what the radio's there for.
That's what the radio was there for, absolutely.
We'll take a break. After that, Paul Coit will be here with all the big sports stories, including...
Joe Linton's goal, which fired Newcastle to the brink of the Carabao Cup final.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back.
Eamonn Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes. Already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamonn. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamonn Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 7:24. Still to come on the programme this morning. At 8:20, we'll be speaking to the Vanity Fair royal editor, Katie Nicholl. She'll have all the latest on Princess Eugenie's announcement of her second child. Lovely news.
And then at 9:15, the actor Brendan Fraser is up for an Oscar for his performance in a film called The Whale. Now, I'm not sure if he is the whale because he's a bit overweight now, but he's getting abuse comments about his weight. Is it the last great taboo? Is it okay to slag off people because of their weight? I mean, there's lots of things you can't slag off people about now, but weight seems to be untouchable. You can say what you want about people who are overweight. That's what Brendan thinks. What do you think? And you can join in. Well, I mean, it's difficult for Brendan Fraser because, I mean, he used to be in those mummy films, a very leading man, very, tight, very...
Yeah, but I think he broke every bone in his body whilst doing his own stunts, and he's had problems exercising, piled on the pounds, and now experienced life from the other side. And he's sort of flying the flag saying, guys, it's not okay to shame people. It's not everybody's fault for
Oddly enough,
weight problems.
I got thinner through breaking every bone in my body.
Yeah, you were wasting away.
Instead of the other way.
That's trauma, isn't it? When you've had a shock and an upset. Yeah.
They are like that.
Yeah.
Do you know, so has anybody ever had the shoulder broken? Because mine was broken, and honestly, it feels like a 10-ton weight on this side.
You need a sling. Maybe you should be wearing a sling.
Maybe I should be wearing a sling. Would that make me look attractive?
Don't know.
Like,
I don't think it would
make me look. Is that like
John Wayne?
Where people wear patches in their eyes and things, and it makes them look
sexier.
Sort
of like they've been, doing something manly.
Yeah. Back pages of the papers, they stack up like this today. The Sun, mosh pit. This is about Everton. They say the club's descended into chaos. Big rumours that the owner, and this is where the mosh pit bit comes from, he's Farhad Moshiri. He could put the club up for sale. They can't attract a manager at the minute. Here's the Star, Joe Linton from Newcastle. His goal could take them to their first Wembley final in 24 years. And if I remember correctly, in that final they were beaten by Manchester United. That was the FA Cup. I remember being there.
Remember being there that day. And the Express says, stick in the mud as UEFA draw up guidelines to stop clubs exploiting financial fair play rules. Paul Coit is with me now. I remember being at that match, United-Newcastle FA Cup final, and I went pitch side. It was pouring with rain at the end, like really steroid stuff. And I interviewed Eric Cantona, and I said, Eric, not even the rain could spoil today. And he went, the rain? The rain? And I said, yeah, the rain. And he said, the rain.
Lorraine.
Yeah, and I went, the rain, il pleut. And he went, oh, the rain.
Oh, I see.
Yes, the rain.
How was Lorraine anyway? Was she all right?
She was fine.
She was fine, yeah.
The rain in Spain stays mainly on the plane.
On the plane. but off the plane. But also, Spurs got knocked out by Newcastle as well in the semi-final, so I don't have good memories of that. But the last time Newcastle were in the final of the League Cup was 76. I think we discussed that, didn't we? The Dennis Stewart overhead goal, overhead kick.
Yeah.
Do you how many of the sponsors? By the way, we've got Carabao Cup now. So you call it the Carabao Cup, the League Cup, the EFL Cup. It's got all these different names.
I mean,
how many can you remember?
No one ever knew what a Carabao was until you had to find out, what is Carabao? What does this mean? So
yes.
It's a drink. It's a drink.
It is a drink. And it's not a caribou, which is the moose type.
It's a moose.
Never confuse
the moose and the hoof.
Carabao with your moose. Yes.
Right, so who else has sponsored the League Cup?
Yes, there's
so
quite a
it used
few.
to be just known as the League Cup.
That's right.
And then I remember it as the Rumbelows.
There was the Rumbelows Cup.
Because the Rumbelows, they were a TV rental show.
Yeah, you could rent your TV and watch it on there, yeah, that's right.
It was definitely the Milk Cup.
There was the Milk Cup was the first one. The Milk Marketing Board. And also it was a different cup because it's the small cup, with the three handles, which you still use, but they had their own cup, the Milk Cup. So that was out, that's why they called it the Milk Cup. So is there any others you can remember?
Were there drinks companies associated?
There's drinks companies, a lot of drinks companies.
Carling.
Carling is another one. Worthington. Coca-Cola. Ooh. Coca-Cola Cup. Capital One Cup was the other one, which was just before Carabao. And the other one was the Littlewoods Cup. It was also the Littlewoods as well.
Yes.
So all names for the League Cup.
Do Littlewoods still exist?
I don't even know whether they do.
I don't think there's any
see
Littlewoods shops anymore.
Maybe online you might get to Littlewoods, but I don't think they're certainly not sponsoring big competitions anymore. But it looks like Newcastle. I mean, it's two legs, of course.
Yeah.
So Southampton played at home against Newcastle, and Newcastle, everybody's talking about Newcastle at the moment.
Yeah.
So then they're going to go to St James's Park. Eddie Howe was saying, well, as any manager would, it's not over yet, we've still a lot of work to do, blah, 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 blah.
But he's right, he's right.
Of course he is, but it's going to be very tough for Southampton to get a result in Newcastle. And then you've got Nottingham Forest at the City Ground tonight.
So then Newcastle will get to the final and then they'll be beaten again by us.
And then you'll be there talking about Lorraine. With Eric Cantona, should everything. Il fait pleu. Yeah.
Right, OK. So Everton, what is the situation?
Well, if you want raining on their parade, Everton, for goodness sake, it is just a disaster. The fans are pretty much the ones, I think, that kept Everton up last year with their support. And now the fans have turned. We know they've turned against Fahad Mashiri, who's the chairman and the owner of Everton. It's a really difficult one to try and work out because when we watch episodes of The Apprentice and you'd have Lord Sugar would say, well, who is responsible for the failure of this task? And they would usually point to someone. Your finger would be all over the place because you're thinking now, is it been Frank Lampard? Has it been the managers in the past? It looks like recruitment. The recruitment's been bad because a lot of money's been spent, but it's not been spent in the right way.
They're committed to building a new stadium, which is we know, for Spurs, for Arsenal, has been a big anchor around their ankle.
Exactly, a huge expense. We're talking 500 million. Now, the big story is that Mashiri is, the story is that Everton are up for sale. Now, Fahad Mashiri has denied this so far because you think where he is, thinking, well, do I just walk away from this and try and sell the whole thing? Yeah. Although he says that he has got backing, he's got financial backing for the building of this new stadium. The last thing they want is a brand new, spanking, amazing stadium and then have to play in the Championship, which is a possibility.
Look, I remember when United went down in the 70s into the old First Division or whatever, and it wasn't the first, it was the Second Division then. And it was the best season ever. We just came straight. Do you remember it was Spurs?
I do. Yeah,
and we came up and we beat everybody, and we had,
Gordon Hill and you had Steve Coppell and you had Stuart Pearson and, you know, it was absolutely so thrilling. Lou Macari. And
it was a reset, though, wasn't it? Because Matt Busby had gone.
Just win all the time.
And then that was it. And then it is a reset. And I just wonder, though, because I think about Tottenham, and a lot of Spurs fans say this from '77, when Tottenham went down. And then that was the reset under Keith Birkinshaw, and then things started to build after that. Whether things are the same these days, I don't know, because there's so much money in the game.
So much money.
And it's so important that they do well.
I was talking... Look, you know, this Bale's,
Bielsa,
you know, apparently he needs convincing that whether he should go and be the Everton manager. I'd have just thought it has Sean Dyche's name written all over it.
I would have thought so.
Yeah.
But then it's it seems more glamorous to get Bielsa involved. Exactly right.
Yeah.
And whereas I spoke to Kevin Radcliffe, you know, the old Everton captain, I spoke to him yesterday, and he was saying, he's pointing the finger at the problem being that Farhad Moshiri is the one that is not only got the money, but he's making all the decisions as well. So he's employing, you know, your head of football, your head of recruitment and players, and he's the one that is actually saying, right, we'll have this, we'll have this, we'll have that.
But it's his train set, you know?
Well, that's it, but the train is crashing into the buffers.
Yeah.
So that's where it seems to be going. So whether he sells it or whether he actually says, right, I need people that know what they're talking about to try and sort this out. But we know that something's very wrong at Everton and something needs to change. They've never been down. But on the good side of it, there's 7 teams that are around that relegation zone that are all within 3 points, and we're only halfway through the season. Could get worse, but it could get better.
You just say that halfway through the season, but we've got February, March, April, and it'll be all over May, won't it?
Don't forget November, though, we had the World Cup, so they had a whole month there. So there's only... We're talking about 19 games to go, so it's still a long way to go yet.
OK,
so, which means you're still in with a chance.
Long way to go in the programme this morning. Paul, for the moment, thank you very much indeed. Good to see you.
By the way, the Long John Silver look would work for you.
With the patch.
I think.
That's about how basically feel like. On a crutch, pieces of it.
Stick someone on the shoulders.
Bye-bye.
After the break, we'll be going through the papers. We've got David Mellor and Scarlett Maguire to take us through those. See you in just a moment.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you know, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club. Oh my goodness, and then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Coming up to 20 to 8. Let's bring you up to date with today's front pages of the newspapers. Here is The Express. It has a warning for the government saying, increase the pension age at your peril.
The Times reports the economy is failing to bounce back fast enough.
And The Guardian says Germany's finally agreed to send tanks to Ukraine following weeks of intense international pressure, calling it an historic move.
Metro says it's grim up north. North of England continues to be badly neglected by the government despite a levelling up policy. Say a levelling up policy, but Scarlett Maguire and David Miller, do you believe there is a levelling up policy, Scarlett? And if so, where's it gone wrong?
Well, if there is a levelling up policy, it has never come to fruition. And I agree with the people who you interviewed. I mean, were interviewed on this before, saying, you know, having some massive thing in Morecambe actually doesn't help the North. I mean, what the North needs is railways and buses. It needs infrastructure. It
needs jobs.
It needs jobs. It needs jobs, but it needs also a way of getting to jobs. I mean, if you live outside Manchester, it can take you longer to get into Manchester than between Manchester and Birmingham or somewhere like that. It is completely ridiculous. And every time people are promised that things will change, nothing happens.
Well, you know, Manchester's a very good tram system.
It's got a brilliant tram system.
I remember being there when they decided to dig up all the roads and put in a tram, and that was the late 80s. And everyone, what the heck is this? This is the end of the world, what they're doing, closing all these roads down. But it turned out to be very, very good. What do you think about levelling up?
Well, I think it's a slogan, isn't it? It's not a policy. It's not anything of any substance. It's a slogan. And, you know, I personally think that slogans are of limited use in the practical business of running a government.
Then, is it?
Very typical of Boris and lots of others as well. But yes, very typical of Boris, of course.
That's sad to think that, actually, that basically, Scarlett, they were sold a lie.
Well, of course they were sold a lie. I mean, they were sold, we'll get Brexit done and we'll level up.
But you see, that's a typical
happened.
slogan, get Brexit done. He never had the slightest interest in getting Brexit done. What he meant was taking a bill through Parliament. But getting Brexit done is about changing hundreds and hundreds of statutes to ensure that they no longer restrict what we can do. And we have the freedom to actually make use of not being in the EU. That hasn't happened. And they say it's going to happen. I'll believe it when I see it.
David, should we talk about the probation service? It's on the front of the Mirror this morning, and this is the story we were leading on yesterday, the horrifying murder of Zara Alina, but the multiple failures of the probation service.
Well, I have very strong views on this because in my 5 years as a Home Office Minister, I was responsible for the probation service, and I have a lot of time for a lot of people in the probation service. But at the end of the day, they're being asked to do an impossible job. They're being asked to assess far more people than they can reasonably assess properly, and then they're being asked to make predictions.
Well, that's another lie again, isn't it? Because we were promised, if there is a service, there's a police service, there's a probation service, but there's not actually. There's an ambulance service, but it's all underfunded, understaffed.
Well, or whether it's underfunded, I mean, there will always be an argument about that. I'm much more concerned with whether the job that they're being asked to do is possible to do. You have half a dozen unpleasant youths who've got criminal records as long as your arm. Which one of them is going to kill somebody? I don't know how they are supposed to tell. But I think the problem is that the probation service has always been used in order that governments don't have to build the relevant number of prisons and that they can persuade the public that they are being protected when, of course, they are not.
Well, I think locking people up for longer is not the answer. And, I mean, the probation service cannot possibly work, as you say, when they have too many people. I mean, I think it's a very, very tough job being a probation officer. But in this particular case, you know, nothing was done when the guy didn't turn up, when all those things.
Exactly.
And it's because...
So if they had locked him up, she'd be alive.
No.
And that's why locking people up is sometimes a good idea.
In some cases, and the rest of the time, what the probation service does do is to try and get people back into society. I mean, in the end, there will be some people who need to be locked up for the rest of their lives, and most people you're trying to turn around, right? But the problem was that in 2010, the probation service was absolutely cut. So a difficult job was made impossible, and
But this association with all with cuts, please believe, and I'm talking of 30, 40 years experience going back when I was a Home Office Minister in the 80s. However much money you put in, you've got to ask yourself, can the job that we're asking them to do be done? And predicting how certain individuals are going to behave is very difficult. And we don't help it by a politically correct attitude to... Why is it that, for instance, was it Norway wouldn't have this boy and refused having to do it? And this boy who claimed to be 14 when he was 19 goes round armed to the teeth and commits his third murder here. I mean, what are we doing? Why are we such mugs, you know?
Yeah. Why are we in so much debt? 2.5 trillion is the national debt. And, Scarlett, one of the ways to reduce that will be not to, to delay the pension age till 68, whenever that comes in. Are you worried about yourself in terms of retiring on a state pension, or do you just worry about other people? Or what do we need to do radical? Is this one of the radical ways?
Well, I think it depends what you're... I mean, I'm over the state pension age and I'm still working, so it doesn't affect me at all. But it's great. I mean, you know, who wouldn't want to do this sort of work, right, and get paid for it? What's much more worrying is people in really tough jobs. Are we really saying that we're expecting people to work until they're practically 70?
Physical jobs.
Well, but also physical jobs, really tough. But the other thing is things like teachers. I mean, things where actually it's stressful and you're working. And what one wonders is whether you can have where it tails off and you can do it slowly, and you can... I think many years ago they did talk about a retirement decade where people could begin to choose. And, you know, people can say, I don't want to retire, but actually there are an awful lot of people who do need to. And so what happens is they end up, you know, they end up getting ill, going to the doctor and getting a sick note for the rest of their lives. And actually that doesn't do them any good
But
either.
the other issue, of course, is people are living more active lives for longer. We had a great dinner with a couple of old friends, literally and metaphorically old, both in their 90s. Really lively conversation and all the rest of it. That would not have been possible 20 years ago.
No, that's true.
So how are we going to... Yeah, I mean, how do we do it?
How would you, David, do you have any ideas? Everybody can talk about cuts, but how do we actually grow the economy? How do we get money to reduce 2.5 trillion of national debt?
Well, you know, it used not to be like that. And it's all grown enormously because of losing control of public expenditure during the pandemic and so on. It doesn't need to be that high. What you've got to look at is what percentage of the national debt is generated by gratuitous public expenditure.
Well, it's this energy price cap that's being blamed for this huge increase. It's been absolutely crippling. And we know that Labour has been saying they want to extend that by another 3 months.
But I mean, the problem is that a lot of people cannot pay. I mean, they can't even pay this cap, which is higher than last year. If we let the cap go, I mean, what are we saying? That poor people really
just have to work for longer. I mean, that's the reality. You know, we can't just have everything and have your cake and eat it, as they say.
No,
Boris always thought we could.
No, what we should be doing is going to the energy companies and saying, basically, guys, in the good years, you got lots of money and whatever it is, but we're all going to, instead of telling us to tighten our belts, you lot are going to have to tighten your belts and you're going to have to charge less for the energy that you supply.
And it's called a windfall tax, and Labour has been asking for it for a long time.
Yeah, well,
which would begin to help bring down.
But,
I mean,
but you know, I have to say that the sadness.
I don't think the windfall tax deters. They all expected the windfall tax. It doesn't. I mean, whatever the quiet lobbying was, it doesn't. I mean, people know it was. They made a fortune by mistake. It wasn't because they were good entrepreneurs.
I certainly agree with that. But you know, I think the sadness is, you know, some of us, we still sit here. Well, I don't really, because I've given up on that many years ago. I've grown out of partisan politics because I don't think they answer any questions. I'm sick of people suggesting, oh, if Labour were in, Labour would do better. Or indeed, if the Tories were in, simplistic solutions to complex problems don't work. At the end of the day, whichever party is in, there are problems that we're going to have. And one of the problems is people wanting to spend more money than they're willing to take in tax.
I think that's really interesting, that somebody that served in a Conservative cabinet for a long period of time and spent a lot of their career in politics has actually basically said you're politically homeless now. And I think a lot of people watching this will actually relate to that. And increasingly people feel they can't.
I look at members of this cabinet and I think, my God, they wouldn't have even been carrying my bags in Mrs Thatcher's time.
But the same can be said for lots of Labour women. Lots of Labour women recently saying they feel politically homeless because they think Labour's got a woman problem.
Well, that's about the trans, and I think that the problem is, I mean, I certainly think Rosie Duffield should not have been heckled by her own side. I mean, there's heckling in the House of Commons that goes on all the time. I thought it was appalling, and whether I agree with Rosie or not, I think that she should have been listened to in respectful silence, even if people disagree with her.
I mean, the fact we're even having to say that.
I know. No, it is ridiculous.
Guys, food for thought there. Appreciate it. Scarlett and David will be back in 45 minutes' time. Thank you.
Let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories.
Rishi Sunak will face new pressure from the Labour leader. Prime Minister's questions today over Nadeem Zahawi's tax affairs. It's after the Prime Minister instructed his ethics advisor to investigate if Mr Zahawi broke ministerial rules over a multi-million-pound settlement with HMRC whilst he was actually Chancellor.
A think tank says the north of England receives one of the lowest levels of investment amongst advanced economies. IPPR North says if the region were a country, Greece would be the only nation to see less public and private investment.
Local journalism will struggle to survive without new support from the government. That's according to the Department of Digital, Culture, Media and Sport, who found some small publishers have had to adapt declining advertising revenue. I don't know why we're showing pictures of Westminster with that, because that's like the antithesis of local journalism. You know, it's all about getting out in your regions, your areas where you work, not to do with centralised London. So that's one of the reasons why journalism is dying. There we go, lack of relevancy.
OK, we are talking burnout now because, as you know, Jacinda Ardern is officially stepping down as Prime Minister of New Zealand. It is her last day today after she admitted that she had nothing left in her tank.
Burnout. What is burnout? And how can you balance pressure in your work with what's going on in your personal life?
Well, we are joined now by freelance journalist Jolie Carey, who has experienced burnout herself and understands exactly how it feels. And I wonder, and this is the elephant in the room, and perhaps I'm not even allowed to say it, but I do wonder if sometimes this is a story women can relate to, particularly when it comes to young mothers. No?
Men don't burn out. No.
I won't finish my point. No, go on, don't worry. I won't bother with the question.
How did you experience it? What was it like to you? No, I do think it's a very sexist thing to say that burnout is only something that women experience.
I was asking if young mothers who are also trying to have a high-profile career like a Prime Minister have a legitimate, if it's too much to
Well,
balance?
I think it's very tough being what she is and doing her job. And I think, Julie, it was very brave of her to stand up and say and admit she had this weakness.
Hi, good morning. Yes, I agree. I think that she has been a breath of fresh air as a global leader. And I think that people were shocked when she made her announcement at that press conference that she had decided herself that she was going to walk away from a job considered to be as important as leading your country. And I think that probably when you see that we've had people like Donald Trump, who literally refused to leave even though he had been defeated in the election, Boris Johnson, who literally needed to be crowbarred out of number 10. And I think that then you had a leader of a country standing there and literally admitting and saying, do you know what? I don't have what this job needs for me to carry on in this position. So for her to walk away was brave, and I think was quite indicative of the way that she has carried out her term in office. She left on her own terms in a very honest way.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people will be very thankful for that she's not superhuman. But does Isabel have a point where maybe as a woman, as a mother, more would be expected of her than that would be of a man? I mean, personally, as you heard, I don't agree with that, because it's as if men don't care about their families and whatever, and burnout isn't sex exclusive.
No, I agree, it's not. But I think that if we look into reports that are around, and there was, I researched and wrote an article off the back of Jacinda's announcement that she was leaving, because I think, like many working mothers, and it's not just women, but to Isabel's point, I think that we know that the responsibility often, and I know I might sound like a bit of a dinosaur now, but the responsibility often for childcare and also for caring for older relatives as you go through your life stages will often sit on the shoulders of women. And so we end up in a position where we just have more to do. And there's that horrible old adage where, can we have it all, which is so outdated and so awful. But one of my friends that I was talking to when I was researching the article said, women don't end up having it all, and women end up doing it all. And I think that you end up in a position where you're juggling so many plates that you end up thinking, I just can't give anymore. But actually, there was a report on women in the workplace by McKinsey that was released about a year ago. And that showed that in the middle of the pandemic, I think 1 in 3 women had considered kind of downshifting in their role at work. And that has now increased to 1 in every 4 women are now considering.
We've only got 15 seconds left in the programme. Sorry to cut across you, but I just want to know from your point of view, are you okay? Did you burnt out? Did you come back? Is your flame lit again?
Yes, absolutely fine. I made a decision to walk and live the life I wanted to live. I'm still working, but I'm working on my own terms now, so I don't have the same pressures and stresses that I did before. And my life's very much my own again now.
Well, good luck to you, and thanks for telling us your story and giving us your analysis on what's happening in New Zealand. Thank you very much indeed. That's Julie Carey. She's a freelance journalist. She suffered burnout, but she's well and truly back. We'll be back right after the break. Don't go away.
Hello there, I'm Greg Dewhurst and welcome to your latest broadcast from the Met Office. Well, a change today. We've got a band of rain pushing south across the UK. Brighter skies following, still rather chilly, particularly across the southern England. Taking a look at the bigger picture, this is that weather front which is bringing the rain slowly slipping its way southwards as we go through the day. However, high pressure nearby, meaning this weather front is largely on the weak side and shouldn't cause any issues. A cloudy start though this morning, still some mist and fog patches first thing, freezing in places too. This band of rain across Northern Ireland, southern Scotland, slowly slipping southwards as we go through the day. Brighter skies following though, but also scattering of showers, increasing winds across northern Scotland here too. Staying cloudy across southern England through the day, some places staying dry but still cold, 6 or 7 at best. Feeling fresher across northern Scotland, Northern Ireland and northern England too, where here temperatures reach 15, 16 degrees across northern parts of Scotland. Through into the evening time, that rain continues to clear southwards, so we'll see starry skies for many, 1 or 2 showers possible down the east coast as we head into the early hours. But with those clear skies, we will see a frost developing as temperatures fall down to 2 or 3 degrees in places, so a patchy frost to start Thursday morning. But a dry start for many, some sunshine, particularly across the west, and the east seeing a little bit more cloud as we go through the day. With a northerly breeze, we will see a few showers moving down the east coast at times, but lots of places staying dry, the best of the unbroken sunshine further west you are. And a fresher feeling day for everyone, temperatures generally around average. They're in the sunshine, not feeling too bad, highs around 8 or 9 degrees across some exposed western coasts. As we head then through towards the end of the week and into the weekend, high pressure always nearby, so it generally stays dry. The cloud will come and go at times. The risk of a little light rain, particularly across the northwest, and temperatures generally around average. See you again soon.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Every weekend, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Bigger and better, starting at 8 p.m. Friday and Saturday.
Can't be too safe. Bring it on. Has there ever been a more innuendo feature?
And Sundays, we're on at 9.
It's ridiculous.
Just get on with it. Maybe you should get a proper job.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
The government moves to raise the retirement age amid dire economic forecasts.
Good morning, it's 8 o'clock. It's Wednesday, the 25th of January, Burns night if you're in Scotland, and you're watching and listening to Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn, Holmes and Isabel Webster.
Leading the news this morning, the Chancellor's reportedly planning to raise the retirement age to 68 in his budget in March. The move would raise billions for the Treasury, but will likely spark a backlash from older voters forced to push back their retirement plans.
Tax cuts are also likely to be ruled out in the budget despite pressure from Conservative MPs. Treasury sources say the Chancellor was surprised by yesterday's 30-year spike in public borrowing.
The north of England's being badly neglected by the government, and new reports claimed. It comes ahead of a speech by the Levelling Up Secretary Michael Gove at a meeting of business leaders in Manchester today.
And Bill Nighy leads British hopes at the Academy Awards after his performance in Living secured him his first Oscar nod at the age of 73. And the sci-fi comedy Everything Everywhere All at Once clinched the most nominations with 11 in total. So to our top story this hour, the Chancellor is reportedly drawing up plans to raise the state pension age to 68 in his March budget. That's 11 years earlier than planned.
It could raise billions for the Treasury. It comes as economists forecast an even deeper recession than previously thought.
Well, joining us now from Manchester is our political editor, Darren McCaffrey. Good morning to you. This is going to be a hard sell, isn't it, for the Chancellor, not least to the Cabinet, but also to backbenchers and the wider electorate?
Yeah, it is indeed. No one in the country obviously wants to work longer than necessarily they have to. And as you say, the Chancellor is looking at potentially raising the retirement age at a time in which, it must be said, of course, lots of 50-year-olds have dropped out of the workplace altogether post-pandemic. It has been a real struggle to find many people to fill employment gaps simply because many of them become economically inactive, deciding to effectively retire early, if you like, Isabel. So it's quite a stretch then to suggest that actually for everyone else they're expecting them to work for longer. Now, under the current government plans, people aged 67 were due to see the retirement age raised in 2028, so by the end of this decade, and by 68 by the end of 2039. But ministers, including, as you say, the Chancellor, considering bringing that forward to the mid-2030s. Now, that might seem like a long way off, but effectively, if you're in your 40s and 50s, you are potentially going to have to work longer. Now, for lots of people, they say this makes sense, that lots of people do not work in physically active jobs anymore, and thus, you know what, people can work longer, and people are living longer. And you know what, actually the amount of money put towards pensions is increasing all the time, that it's just not economically feasible to keep the retirement age where it is. Whereas for others, they feel that this will have a big impact. It is not something they look forward to, including some charities saying that there is no justification for raising the state age. We know that people will lose out, or those who are unable to work due to ill health and caring responsibilities. You say it's going to be a very, very difficult sell at a time, of course, in which the government is facing lots and lots of difficult questions. Prime Minister's question time a little later on today, and we think that's going to be dominated, isn't it, by the ongoing affair involving the chairman of the Conservative Party, Nadeem Zahawi, who's under an awful lot of pressure to resign. I suspect Keir Starmer will be asking lots of questions on that. Problem for the Prime Minister is that increasingly Conservatives are saying that Nadeem Zahawi needs to stand aside as this investigation is carried out, and also it's turning lots of attention back to the Prime Minister's own tax affairs, something that I'm sure he most certainly does not want.
OK, Darren, we should point out the reason you are in Manchester today is there's the big convention of the North taking place with the likes of Michael Gove, his opposite number, Lisa Nandy, and also a number of the Northern mayors attending. Look, there's been lots of talk about levelling up, hasn't there, in the last couple of weeks? Lots of question mark and controversy about where the funding actually goes. What will this convention be doing today?
Yeah, really interesting. This is the Convention of the North. As you say, it is all primarily focused on levelling up. We can see mayors from across the different northern metropolitan areas gather here in Manchester alongside the Levelling Up Secretary Michael Gove and his shadow, Lisa Nandy. I think what the kind of different mayors would make the case of the sick to death of the kind of begging bowl attitude that essentially the Treasury has this big pot of money that's there to level up different parts of the country, but the different areas need to compete to get that money. What the people here are saying is it would be much better if actually we just had that money in the first place, we didn't have to compete for it, and we make the decisions about where the money goes, that we know our local areas a hell of a lot better than Whitehall does. And obviously this follows the second round of levelling up funding last week, in which lots of money went to the south as much to the north, and people felt that wasn't what levelling up was intended to do. So it'll be an interesting discussion. I think it is frankly something the government is open to, but as I say, lots of people would rather decisions, more decisions and more the money was in places like Manchester than it was in Westminster.
Thank you very much for that.
OK, will it actually achieve anything? Well, ahead of that conference today, our reporter Sophie Reaper has been getting the views of people in the northern region.
The phrase levelling up has always been controversial. Originally part of the Conservative Party's 2019 manifesto, the idea is to close the gap between the South East and less prosperous areas of the UK.
It's simply wrong that individuals in communities in the North and the Midlands have limited life chances and fewer opportunities than those in London and the South East.
One part of levelling up is, of course, improving regional infrastructure. For that, the construction industry requires support, but are they getting what they need?
I would like to see more people come into the industry with a higher level of skill and training. I'd like to see more women in the industry. I'd like to have our industry reflect the wider society. So not quite yet. It's early days, and to actually change the amount of people that come into our industry will take a significant amount of time.
Last year, the government set out 12 levelling up missions to achieve by 2030. Just one of those was to significantly increase the number of people with high-quality skills training in each region. I asked Sean what he made of the government's progress.
I actually think the distribution of what the government spends in the construction industry needs to be more even. So we need to improve our infrastructure. That would include hospitals, roads, homes, education. We need more money invested in those areas.
Last week, the North received £583.1 million in order to level up. But with both the North East and Yorkshire and Humber receiving less money than London, questions have been asked about just how fairly that money has been divided.
Right, so...
When asked, this is what the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, had to say.
What we're doing is investing in local communities across the country. Levelling up is about making sure people feel pride in the places they call home. It's about driving jobs and investment. That's what we're doing.
Huge investments have been made across the north of England, including £50 million for a new Northern Eden project in Morecambe and £20 million for a quayside regeneration in Gateshead. But do the people of the north feel they will actually benefit as a result? Do you think you've benefited from levelling up?
No. Yeah, they may have put some in Morecambe, 50 million, but that's to build a brand new thing that isn't there at the minute.
Well, the government need to start caring, not just the government, local authorities as well. Because we run a food bank here. We're basically giving free food away, and we've got a lot of families struggling, and people actually willing to considering to take their own lives because they're struggling. That's not levelling up to me.
It just depends. If they put it in education and they put it in NHS, yeah, I would have benefited. But I don't think I benefited.
It's clear that money is definitely being invested here in the north of England, but only time will tell whether it will actually lead to levelling up. Sophie Reaper, GB News.
Now, the police watchdog has warned the culture within the Met Police is discouraging officers from challenging their boss.
At 10 o'clock this morning, the London Assembly Police and Crime Committee will question the Met's Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, on the David Carrick case.
Well, joining us now is our national reporter, Ellie Costello. Good morning to you, Ellie. What are we expecting to happen? It's a very unusual setup, this.
Yes, it definitely is. Good morning to you, Isabel, and good morning to you, Eamonn. In about 2 hours' time, the Met Police Chief is going to be questioned by members of the London Assembly. Now, they're an elected body and their job is to scrutinise the Mayor. But of course, under Sadiq Khan, the London Mayor, as part of his remit, he has to look after crime in the capital. And of course, this comes down to the Met Police Chief, Mark Rowley. That's why he is going to be questioned and scrutinised today by that body, and we can expect that it's going to be a very difficult line of questioning, of course, following on from the revelations of David Carrick. He is was the serving police officer who admitted to 48 counts, 49 offences, including 20 counts of rape against 12 women, and that counted over 2 decades of service in the Metropolitan Police. Now, he, of course, was sacked from his role as a Metropolitan Police officer last week after admitting to those offences. But there will be questions for Mark Rowley today on why did this go undetected for so long? Why did fellow officers not feel as though they could report it? Why, if those officers did report it, were they not listened to? Those are just some of the questions that we can expect to hear today. Now, we know somewhat of what Mark Rowley is going to say in response to those questions. We know that he's been apologetic to the victims of David Carrick. He says that he's let them down as a force. He said he hadn't applied the sense of ruthlessness that should have been to guard the Metropolitan Police's integrity. He apologised to victims and he said that he wants women across London to feel safe. Now, he has only been the Metropolitan Police Commissioner since September, but he did say that he is ruthless at rooting out those who corrupt our integrity. So we believe that that is going to be the focus of his answers today. But it is important that the London Assembly ask the right questions today, because those are the kind of questions that Londoners are going to want to be put to Mark Rowley. And it's also very important that he gives comprehensive answers and hopefully some idea of a solution as well.
OK, I mean, it would be ambitious, I suppose, to imagine that he'll be able to restore public faith from one event of this kind. But it does show a kind of shift, does it not, from the Metropolitan Police in trying to address what has got to be an all-time low in terms of particularly female safety in the capital.
Well, absolutely. This is an institution in crisis, many people would say. And there's also this question of the culture that has been prevalent in the Metropolitan Police. We hear about the nicknames, don't we? I won't say them on air now on Breakfast TV, but that Wayne Couzens had and David Carrick had, both nicknames that were known by their colleagues, which might have suggested that they were very bad men and not to be trusted. And we also know that both David Carrick and Wayne Couzens use their role as a police officer to gain the trust of their victims. So it is fair to say that these cases have shattered the trust of women in the police force. And we saw just last weekend, didn't we, Refuge, the largest domestic women's charity. They put 1,071 rotten apples outside New Scotland Yard, and that is to represent the 1,071 officers, current or retired officers, that are being investigated for violence against women. They did that to demonstrate quite how big of a problem this is. And of course, one of the questions for them will be, why did this go undetected for so long? So of course, So Mark Rowley today, will expect him to say that he wants to raise standards. Also at 9:30 this morning, we're going to have new figures for the recruitment of police officers in England and Wales. So perhaps he will remark on those as well and talk about the kinds of people he's going to bring into the Metropolitan Police Force and how he's going to restore integrity and trust.
Ellie, thank you very much indeed. The time is approaching 8:15. Let's bring you up to date with what else is happening news-wise. The United States and Germany are planning to send tanks to Ukraine. The American president is preparing to announce plans to send at least 30 of them, whilst the German Chancellor has decided to send at least 14. A
14-year-old boy has been arrested after a teenage girl was stabbed at a school in Manchester. Officers arrived at Parswood High School yesterday afternoon. The girl was taken to hospital for treatment, but her injuries are said to be serious but not life-threatening. Police are appealing for information.
Scottish teachers are now halfway through their 16-day strike action. Staff in both South Ayrshire and Edinburgh will walk out today. The union claims the Scottish Government has little or no interest in resolving the dispute, but the Government says the pay demands are not affordable. Princess Eugenie is expecting her second child. We'll bring you up to date with the Vanity Fair royal editor Katie Nicholl about all the royal talk right after this.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back.
Eamonn Holmes back on the TV
Surprised
with me this morning.
even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes.
Oh, good.
Already to bless.
Oh, Eamonn. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamonn Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even some ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, still to come on the programme this morning. This is what we've got.
We have the actor Brendan Fraser talking about his nomination for that role as an obese man in The Whale. He's been speaking about ending the bias against obesity. So at 8:45, we'll be speaking to a plus-size model about her experience of fat shaming.
Tonight is Burns Night. It commemorates the birthday of the Scottish poet Robert Burns. We'll discover more about Scotland's national bard. 9:15.
And we'd love to hear from you throughout the course of the morning. Let us know your thoughts on anything we're talking about. You know how to do it.
So this Harry and Meghan Netflix docuseries, which I must admit I haven't watched. Have you watched it?
I've watched a bit of it, yeah.
Have you?
Mm-hmm.
And did you?
If they'd have just stuck to talking about their kids and their love story, then I could have completely fallen back in love with them, which was kind of, I suppose, the aim of the series. But then when they started to grind that axe, I kind of lost interest and I switched it off.
Well, the director of this series claims that Buckingham Palace tried to discredit the couple's allegations by saying the filmmakers didn't ask for a royal comment when actually they did. Does that make a darn bit of difference to me? No, it doesn't.
Well, let's get the inside scoop on all the royal stories from Katie Nicholl, who joins us, Vanity Fair's royal editor. Always good to get you on, Katie. What do you make of this?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it? This was a row that we were talking about on this very show before Christmas, after the docuseries have aired. And you may recall, if you got this far in the series, that about sort of 30 seconds in, or a couple of minutes in at least, there was an image flashed up that said that the royal family had been contacted for comment. And they had declined to comment, essentially. And this created a row within minutes of this, eagerly anticipated series airing, because according to Buckingham Palace, they were contacted for comment, but it was by a third party, not by Netflix, not by Archwell, which is the production company for Harry and Meghan that was involved in the making of it. And somehow, somewhere, communication has clearly broken down. Buckingham Palace claimed they went to both Archwell and to Netflix to try and get some more information. They received nothing back, and therefore they say they weren't given the opportunity to comment. But here we have Liz Garber speaking in an interview to Vanity Fair saying, well, all of this is just a big attempt to discredit the docuseries. I mean, frankly, the docuseries is out. It's had a huge impact. For me, rather than reinventing that old row, this story in The Sun, which I picked up this morning, I think is really interesting. They have done Newsweek. They picked up a Newsweek magazine poll. This is an American magazine, and they are taking the temperature of Americans' feelings towards Harry and Meghan. And in the past month, public opinion and support of Harry has dropped 45 points. In the States, while Meghan's has dropped 36 points. And according to this Newsweek survey, almost half of the Americans, 44%, said that Harry was wrong in his autobiography to be relaying private conversations with family members. So I think you're getting the sense that even in America, where it's been very, very supportive of Harry and Meghan, the tide is now turning, and perhaps they need to move on from these rows with directors in the palace, rows over the autobiography, and actually get on with what they said they were going to do in the States, which was some good philanthropic work.
Although, of course, with the coronation not very far in the distance, we're going to be hearing more from them, aren't we, and seeing more from them, whether they're invited or not invited, and all their views on that as well.
Yeah, it's a story going to rumble
Some
on.
happier royal news now. Princess Eugenie and her husband, Jack Brooksbank, they've announced their second child.
Yes, on Instagram. And I do love this about Eugenie. I think she is a thoroughly fresh, modern, I'm going to say bit part royal, because she's not a full-time working royal. When she needs to step up to the occasion, she does. But, she's doing what Charles has envisaged for members of the royal family that aren't in direct succession to the throne, having a career, having a family, having an ordinary life. And so they've announced that they're having a second baby. Not a huge surprise. Their little boy August has just turned 2. And she's also said in this interview that he is going to be an eco-warrior from the moment he celebrates his second birthday. Well, she's obviously got a genius for a child, but she's ticking all the right boxes.
To be fair, I mean, a lot of the royals are eco-warriors. It would just be following in the footsteps.
It is, of her grandfather, exactly.
Even Prince William with the Earth shots. And I mean, lots of people want to jump on that bandwagon of saying, oh, not an activist. But that's kind of what the royals do, isn't it?
It is what the royals do. And I like the refreshing approach to royalty that she's doing. I think it's great.
Her mum, Sarah, Duchess of York, she has said it was granny heaven to her. Now, Sarah can comment. What about her dad, Andrew? I mean, does being ruled out of public life exclude him from commenting on this sort of thing? I mean, that seems quite cruel if it does.
It doesn't, but he has been airbrushed
out of key family moments. And if you think back to her sister Beatrice's wedding, there was no official picture of Andrew. I think the risk with bringing Andrew in any capacity, even a happy story like this, Eamonn, is that it then reignites everything else that comes with the Andrew story. And of course, it's only days since we had reports that he's going to challenge that £3 million settlement
what do you
he paid to Virginia Giuffre-Roberts.
Would he be wise to challenge this, or could he challenge this?
I think, listen, from a human side of things, of course, if you've been accused of doing something you haven't, you want to fight back. I do understand that. But I think for the image of the royal family, as Isabel, you were just saying, we're on the eve of a coronation, to suddenly put all of this out into the public domain, my personal feeling is it can only be hugely damaging.
And I suppose if you really want to prove your innocence, you take the witness box, don't you? And
which he never did.
Absolutely no way Buckingham Palace would want to see that, because every time he speaks, he makes it worse, as we saw with Emily Maitlis.
Absolutely. And, you know, he said he would make himself available to the FBI, that he was willing to be questioned, he'd lay everything out on the table, but that never happened. This just feels too late. You know, he's used part of his inheritance from the Queen to pay off this settlement. I think he just needs to slip into the background quietly. And to be honest, even if he was to go through all of these steps, the idea that he's coming back into royal life, it's not going to happen.
Fair enough. It's Burns night tonight. Do you think the royals will be celebrating that? I can imagine they probably do.
I think the King will be, with his love of Scotland. The King and the Queen consort, absolutely, yes.
Fabulous. Haggis all round.
Absolutely.
Good stuff, Katie. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Look, with that, we're going to take a break, and then we go through the newspapers this morning. David Miller, Scarlett Maguire. Just need your company after this.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you know, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB+ radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere. Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Very good to see you again. 8:30 is the time. This is Breakfast on GB News, on the radio, on television, online with Eamonn and Isabel.
Let's bring you up to date with today's front pages. Here's the Express as a warning for Rishi's government, saying increase the pension age at your peril.
The Times reports the economy is failing to bounce back fast enough.
The Guardian says Germany has finally agreed to send tanks to Ukraine following weeks of intense international pressure, calling it a historic move.
OK, the Metro says it's grim up north as the north of England continues to be badly neglected by the government despite a so-called levelling up policy. Big conference happening on that in Manchester today.
So we welcome back former Chief Secretary to the Treasury, David Mellor, and former Labour advisor, Scarlett Maguire, to review the papers for us one last time this morning. And Scarlett, let's start with you. You've chosen a story about freedom of expression in The Guardian.
Yeah, I mean, this is quite shocking, actually, that Britain is one of the lowest countries for freedom of expression. And the reason, and we hear all about, oh, you know, it's the woke, the cancel. It's not, actually. It's government policies and it's the intimidation of journalists. And the intimidation of journalists often by lawyers sort of doing, and if you, I mean, the obvious one that we've just come across is Nahil Zahawi, who, you know, when journalists started asking him questions, sent lawyers letters, threatening lawyers letters, and this happens over and over again with the very rich, actually lots of Russian and linked things, who autocrats who just go oligarchs, and it's really, really bad. And actually, the CEO of Index on Censorship said she was shocked. She did not expect Britain to come that far down.
It's interesting. Bob Seeley, Tory MP, saying yesterday law firms silencing media are engaging in legal gangsterism.
Yeah, but I agree with that. They're just guns for hire. But you can always tell when you've got something, when expensive lawyers start blustering and talking rubbish. And a lot of lawyers get paid a lot of money for talking rubbish. But at the end of the day, all you've got to do is take no notice. And it's interesting, of course, that Bob Seeley proved in the House of Commons this week that the only thing you need to do is to get into Parliament and read out all the stuff they don't want to know, and you're exempt from any kind of legal redress.
David, all the stuff that certain people don't want the public to know, and if you're in that business, that industry, you know what they don't want the public to know. I just find it very interesting that the general public, which brings me on, Scarlett, to when we talk about this, and this is an official index which talks about censorship as such, but freedom of expression, do you think generally as a nation, as a people, that we are frightened of saying it as it is?
Well, one of the reasons that I don't say anything on Twitter is that I actually would find that to be abused on Twitter, I'd find it very personally hurtful, and I know I can't deal with it. So, but I don't think that that's particularly British. I mean, I think, and I mean, I do know a lot of people who don't say what they think because now publicly, I mean, I'll say what I think in front of you. Yeah. But it's interesting that you have these pile-ons and they're really, really hurtful.
But the thing that is so wrong about Twitter, it's a profoundly un-British thing, because what you should do, is state what you believe and attach your name to it. These days, you know, some saddo can sit in a bed sit and write all kinds of wretched abuse under some fake name. So it's not a proper debate. It's just a sort of license to be offensive and sometimes really cause serious mental harm to the victims.
There's a certain type of individual that doesn't care what other people think of their opinions. And let's think the king of all of this is Piers Morgan. I know Piers, and I genuinely believe he doesn't care what people think of what he thinks.
Maybe Jeremy Clarkson as well, until the
until
he went over the top.
But they're both people who make their money and their fame and their fortune out of being noticed. So they want to be noticed because that's their stock in trade.
But actually, the interesting thing about Piers Morgan is he might not mind if you disagree with his opinions. But I mean, he loathed Meghan Markle from the beginning because she dropped him, right? And he said, oh, you know, that means she's a terrible person. Well, I mean, maybe he's boring. I have no idea. I don't know.
He's not boring. No, he's not boring.
I mean, there's always that argument about she dropped him. I mean, he was happily married to Celia Walden, as he always points out at that point. It wasn't, you know, like a romantic advance or anything like that.
No, but he's gone on. It's him that said it. I mean, she's never said a word about it. He's said, you know, suddenly
she went cold on him.
Yeah, and I just think we all go cold on people. We have a right to do that. And it's quite interesting that yes, he says incredibly controversial things, knowing that there'll be a pile-on, and he's perfectly happy with that.
Yeah,
and yet, if you know, one person who insults him personally, end of.
OK, all very interesting. David, at this time of the day, it's just after 8:30, a lot of people will be on the telephone trying to get themselves an appointment with their GP, and for many of them it will be mission impossible. So the Mail, who I do have to say have a particular bias against GPs in particular, they're always called £100,000 a year GPs, written by a journalist who's on £150,000. So what have they got to say today about GPs?
Well, what they're basically saying is that a lot of people in exactly the situation that you describe, who would like to see a doctor, are struggling to get a face-to-face GP appointment. I think that's outrageous.
It's more efficient not to go face-to-face, isn't there?
But you can miss all kinds of things.
Yes.
At the end of the day, to have to diagnose somebody on a television screen, I just don't think that works, because so much particularly if you're looking at lesions of one kind or another, you absolutely have to see the things, and then you can make your mind up as to whether this is significant or whether it isn't significant, you know?
Now, here's an incredible story in the Times linked to this, Scarlett. Universities are told stop training doctors. What's meant by this?
I think it's not quite stop training them. What it is saying you've got to take fewer sixth formers to train doctors, and if you don't, you will be fined. And what is incredible about this is we need more doctors. Everybody knows this. When Jeremy Hunt was a backbencher, he said we should double the number of doctors we train. And meanwhile, Robert Halfon, who's the higher education minister, has written to universities saying bring the numbers down.
Sorry, I don't really understand why. Why explain that to me?
I do not understand. I read the story. He has not said. He's just said we want the numbers down.
He doesn't get to decide. To be clear, Robert Halfon doesn't get to decide whether or not universities train more.
But why would he advocate it?
The government puts a cap on it because doctors are very expensive. I mean, I think taxpayers is £160,000 a doctor, which I have to say is worth it. Actually the government's always put a cap on doctors, and we just thought naively that the cap had been removed or at least put incredibly higher. But they haven't. They've said, and during the pandemic, more doctors were trained, more students were taken on, and they're now saying bring the numbers down.
OK,
bad news.
I'm sure it's all linked to this next story, David, talking about the economy, which is on the front of a lot of the papers today. And we were talking about the cost of the NHS and raising pension ages because we're all living longer. What is going wrong with the economy at the moment? We're failing to bounce back faster.
Yes, I mean, the front page of the Times says the economy is failing to bounce back. And, of course, that becomes a serious thing because so much depends on economic growth in order then to ensure that funds are available which can then be dissipated by politicians in all the ways they find exciting, because politicians are much better at spending your money than actually generating wealth. And so much depends on there therefore being growth. I mean, the downgrade that the Office for Budget Responsibility has told Jeremy Hunt that they overestimated the economy last year. And this is the interesting thing. The downgrade would wipe out all of the government's £9.2 billion headroom in Hunt's autumn statement. So it's a significant thing.
But what's so interesting about it is that it's front page and a shock, whereas we've been told for the last 18 months that we're at the beginning of a recession. And I do remember when Liz Truss was going for the Tory leadership, that she kept saying, no, you're talking Britain into a recession, it's just not true. And we all thought, this is madness. So actually, why it's a surprise, I don't understand.
It's very confusing. I feel like we had lots of positive economic news last week and everything's looking shiny again, and now they're revising down forecasts. It's sort of, I don't know, a bit bipolar, the state of the economy.
Exactly. And so are some of the people who make judgments about the economy.
I tell you what is a surprise to me. I thought when we go abroad, we had the protection of, what our passport gives us, which is embassy protection and government cover. UK citizens who need legal assistance or practical help whilst travelling abroad will get a new right to consider protection under Labour plans. So we don't have this, we can't take this for granted now?
I was... From experience, I know that we don't have it. I mean, many years ago, I was in a very bad motorbike accident in Greece, and my boyfriend at the time he was in a coma, and the Greek doctors wouldn't... It was in Rhodes, so they couldn't phone to Britain, and the insurance company said, we're not going to send a plane until we get a doctor. And luckily, he was an ITN reporter, and ITN said, if we haven't got a plane on the runway by 10 o'clock, it's going to lead the 10 o'clock news. They saved his life. There is no question. But what was incredible was that the embassy people did nothing. I mean, this was a man whose life was...
What are they there for?
I know. And this story actually is about Nadine Zahawi Ratcliffe, who was told she had no rights. She was a British citizen. I mean, I just think that when you get out there, you find that actually the embassies don't do anything. I think Labour's completely right. And I mean, it's not about, in neither her case nor my case, were we asking for money. I mean, we were in dire straits and needed help. I mean, I can understand embassies getting very angry when people go, I'm broke and, can you lend me money? But actually, we've got to look after our people abroad.
But I think if a Foreign Office official was here, she would say that they do actually do their very best. But of course, they are themselves not staffed up to deal with an awful lot of this stuff. And I think if anybody who relies on an embassy to deal with their problems is making a mistake, I think. Not because there's anything wrong with embassies, but it's just not what they're there for.
It's the same old story that we're hearing everywhere. They're also understaffed. Exactly. Should we go to the Mail, Scarlett? Because the picking on Zahawi feels like journalists are going to be trawling over every element of his life. They're talking now about whether he had the correct planning permission or not for his Cotswolds mansion. In fact, that he could have been living there for a long period, actually in breach of the law.
Well, this is quite an interesting story because he moved in knowing that only agricultural workers or the like could live there. Neither he nor his wife are agricultural workers. And then he kept on having planning permission refused by the local council, which was Stratford-on-Avon, and then after 10 years, because he didn't move out and the local council didn't do anything about it happened to be a Conservative council, after 10 years, he'd been there, and so he's got permission to stay. And what it shows is he's a player. I mean, he understood what he had to do to get that house, and it was built for, it was a new build, and it was built for agricultural workers who have a tough enough time without some millionaire buying it.
And, well, he's a local member of Parliament, so he's expected to live in his constituency. I mean, I have a lot of time for Nadeem. I've known him for 35 years. I admire him. I did once say to him, why do you want to go into politics? You've got a very successful business. And next time I see him, I'll remind him of that. But yes. I tell you, the problem really is, as I know for a brief period of my life, and I became a subject of attention, particularly from the tabloids, once they've got you in the headlights, what they want then to do is search for anything remotely discreditable, and out it comes. And that's why, if Nadeem said to me, he's got lots of these bright young things that used to so advise Boris Johnson so well, and of course he doesn't need the sad old gits like me. But my advice to him would be, you've got a problem, just resign and say you'll come back when it's all sorted out. But don't sit there as a target, and every day it'll get worse.
He's not going to accuse himself, and
that's going to be a problem.
Element of arrogance, do you think?
No, I think it's just that when you're there, you feel you're going to try and stay there. And don't make no mistake, there'll be plenty of people who, whether they're friends or whether they're not, and whether their intentions towards him are good or not, they'll be telling him to stick it out. Yeah. But no true friend will tell him to
David,
stick it out.
This is the man who expected the taxpayer to pay for his warming his horses.
Well,
right?
To be fair, he did say he was mortified by that, and that was another tax expenses mistake. But yeah, it doesn't wash well with the public. Doesn't look good, does it?
People they talk about, how do you earn your money? What do you do for a living? I'm a motor mechanic. I'm a painter and decorator. I'm a lawyer. I'm a doctor. I'm whatever. What is Nadeem Zahawi? He's a successful businessman. So what? But
I can tell you, because as I say, I've known him for 35 years. He's extremely creative, and basically he formed a number of businesses, including YouGov, which was conspicuously the most successful of the companies that did opinion polling and so on. He's just a very, very talented guy. In fact, he's the sort of talented guy that normally would have nothing whatever to do with politics. And he might be wishing he'd taken that advice I gave him all those years ago.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, David. We really appreciate that. Scarlett, thank you very much. And thanks for today. We say goodbye to you two. So the time's 13 minutes before 9 o'clock, bringing you up to date with what else is happening news-wise.
Rishi Sunak is to face new pressure from the Labour leader today over Nadeem Zahawi's tax affairs. It's after the Prime Minister was asked to investigate if Mr Zahawi broke ministerial rules over a multi-million-pound settlement with HMRC whilst Chancellor.
PUBG and JD Witherspoon has revealed that its sales last year were far higher than the previous year after a strong Christmas, but still lagging behind pre-pandemic levels. They said sales surged by nearly 18% over the last 3 months of 2022. That will have something to do with the World Cup, I would have thought.
As we've been experiencing here in the office, Microsoft services have gone down around the world this morning, leaving users unable to access the services, including Teams and Outlook. The company says they're investigating issues impacting services.
It's funny how our whole world comes to an end if Wi-Fi or internet goes down or whatever. And I'm thinking there's stuff I've got to access in terms of emails. This morning I'm thinking, oh, please don't tell me. Nightmare. Anyway, he was an award-winning heartthrob of the 90s. Very good actor, this guy was known for his starring roles. George of the Jungle, the Mummy films. Brendan Fraser is who we're talking about. He's made headlines and bagged himself an Oscar nomination this year, playing a morbidly obese professor in a film called The Whale.
So during that film, he was actually wearing a prosthetic fat suit for the role. But the actor has actually spoken out about the obesity bias that still exists in society. This is what he said.
Obesity is the last domain of prejudice that we as a society still haven't changed the way we speak about it, the way we refer to people, the way that we care about one another. And I'm hopeful that that can change. And I do believe in the power of film and culture to change the conversation in a way that allows people to open their hearts and minds a bit more.
Okay. I'll be interested to see that film, because is it encouraging people to mock overweight people or not? Obesity advocate and founder of All About Obesity, Sarah LeBrock, joins us, and also here in the studio we have a model, a plus-size model, Imogen Ivy. Very good to see you, Imogen.
Good morning.
How can we mock overweight people, which happens all the time, and see somebody as beautiful as you at the same time? How does that work out? You know, how does it? So you can.
It's too early for that.
You can be big and beautiful, you think?
Oh, 100%.
Right. So it's your living, it's what you do, and you say, look at me, I'm bigger, I've got curves, I can still be proud of my body and whatever. Do you get negative comments towards yourself?
Not so much, because I am in very safe circles on social media and with modelling and so, but you know, trolling is so out there. Fat shaming, fat phobia is instilled in so many of us, but there's definitely a new wave that people are unlearning or understanding what fat phobia is, unlearning it, because a lot of it is so internalised. But yeah, I get a bit of it too. We all get it, sadly.
Well, I want to bring Sarah LeBrock in. I'm really interested to get your views, because I think most people, right-thinking people anyway, would agree that shaming anyone is just plain bad manners, it's unkind, and it's not what we should, any of us, be doing. But to advocate for obesity, that's different, isn't it? That's to celebrate it. And there will be some people who would say we shouldn't be celebrating obesity, not least because of the associated health risks with it. Just explain the difference between the two, because you can not shame fat people, but not necessarily advocate for it. So you take a different position.
Yeah, I don't advocate as in say, I'm not standing there saying everyone should be living with obesity. When I advocate for obesity, I advocate for the fact that we need to understand what obesity is. We need to understand that people come in different shapes and sizes, and actually that's just down to so many different reasons, with genetics and biology and physiological things being a part of that. And what I'm advocating for is that we treat human beings the same, whether they're in a smaller body or a larger body. That's what I advocate for, and advocate for people just understanding what obesity is. So not about kind of glorifying anything or kind of saying people need to look a certain way. It's about actually people come in different shapes and sizes. We know that. People have different hair colour, different heights. So people have different body shapes and sizes. So why do we make such a big issue about that when we don't about other, characteristics of people?
I'll tell you why we do, Sarah, because you're deemed. I used to be about 2.5 stone heavier than I am now, and people assume, first of all, they make these assumptions that you're lazy, that you don't do exercise, that you don't work as hard as other people and whatever. And I actually could argue that I was overweight. I was overweight because I was eating the wrong things, but I was also working too hard. I wasn't getting enough sleep. I was just going, I was on planes, trains, automobiles, motorway service stations, whatever, all the usual story. You'll know what it is. But it was my fault. There's no doubt it was my fault. But it's the assumption that you're not as good as other people. You're lazy, you're slovenly, you're gluttonous. Negative, all these negative things.
That's true. Yeah, and that's because of the narrative that we've been telling people for so long. And I think if we go back to The Whale and what Brendan Fraser's doing, it's nice to see an A-list celebrity doing a film that's talking about obesity and trying to show people what it's really like and trying to change that messaging. Because how often do we see that person living with obesity being mocked or being in a role where they're being made fun of, or they're the baddie, or it's always a negative kind of connotation around it. So actually this film is trying to get people to show more empathy and understanding around that person living with obesity. I live with obesity myself, and I have completed 2 Olympic distance triathlons whilst living with obesity. So I'm not lazy, but I still live with obesity. So actually, it's not as simple as we think, and assumptions shouldn't be made, because everyone is different and people can live in bigger bodies and still be fit and still be healthy. And that's what people can't quite get their heads around.
Imogen Ivy, do you think the world's changing? Because I look back to when I used to read teen magazines and was going through a girls' school. There was a lot of pressure on young women, and to find female role models who weren't stick thin was virtually impossible. But to have people like you celebrating curves is relatively new. So are we getting better at addressing?
Well, I hope we're getting better. Yeah, we're definitely seeing more of a shift in and a demand for plus-size modelling and diversity and inclusivity. You know, the boomers, you guys grew up with, you know, magazines constantly telling you to be on diets. Like, you can't help that where that fat shaming was born, really, because it was the worst thing in the world to be large. Whereas there's a generation, a shift now where fat is a proud word. I use it in a positive light, you know.
But could I just say to you, can some of this so-called shaming not be out of love or care? But what I'm saying is, people will look at you and they'll say, you know, she's a lovely, lovely woman, Imogen's absolutely beautiful, but maybe this weight is bad for her heart, bad for her kidneys, and it's out of concern. That's what I'm trying to say.
But
now, I know Sarah was saying she feels she's healthy, but doctors may disagree in the long term that weight is healthy for you.
Can't look, but we're not doctors, so you can't look at anyone and tell anything about anyone's health by how I look. You can't tell about my mental health, my physical health, nor should I judge you on your appearance. That's kind of the narrative. We all need to have more empathy. That's what Brendan Fraser's saying. That's what Sarah was saying. You know, if you zoom out on it, this is much more than just body. This is about health
but I suppose at the minute in time I agree with you. My blood pressure is probably worse than your blood pressure or whatever, but long term, the indicating factors are that your blood pressure will be bad, therefore cardiovascular system will be bad for you in 15 years or 20 years from now.
But that's none of your business, you know what I mean? I think that's where you've got to draw a line. We all need to stop being judgmental and talking about other people's bodies when my body is the least interesting thing about me, and it's none of your worries, or anyone's worries, you know? So why are we commenting on it? I think that's the narrative that needs to be changed.
I love that.
OK. Imogen Ivy, thank you very much indeed. Imogen is a plus-size model, and Sarah LeBrock is an obesity advocate and stated her case very well today. Your views would be interested in those. We're back after the break.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Every weekend, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Bigger and better, starting at 8 p.m. Friday and Saturday.
Can't be too safe. Bring it on. Has there ever been a more innuendo feature?
And Sundays, we're on at 9.
It's ridiculous. Just get on with it. Maybe you should get a proper job.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, it's Eamonn Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
The government moves to raise the retirement age amid dire economic forecasts.
Hello there, folks. A very good morning to you. Thank you for your company. The time is 9 o'clock on this Wednesday, the 25th of January. Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
Here's what's leading the news this morning. The Chancellor's reportedly planning to push up the retirement age to 68 in his budget in March. The move would raise billions for the Treasury, but will likely spark a backlash from older voters forced to push back their retirement plans.
Tax cuts are also likely to be ruled out in that budget, despite pressure from Conservative MPs. Treasury sources say the Chancellor was surprised by yesterday's 30-year spike in public borrowing.
The north of England's being badly neglected by the government, a new report has claimed. It comes ahead of a speech by the Levelling Up Secretary Michael Gove at a meeting of business leaders in Manchester today.
And happy Burns Night. Millions of Scots around the world will be celebrating the birthday of the Baird, Robert Burns. We'll discover more about his background and if he's still relevant in 2023.
So it's leading our news this morning. The Chancellor's reportedly drawing up plans to raise the state pension age to 68 in his March budget. That is 11 years earlier than planned.
Of course, this could raise billions for the Treasury and comes as economists forecast an even deeper recession than previously thought.
Well, joining us now from Manchester is our political editor, Darren McCaffrey. Good morning to you, Darren. Look, things have to be pretty strained, don't they, within the Treasury if the Chancellor is considering something that will be so unpalatable at the ballot box.
Yeah, indeed, there will be millions of people, particularly if you're in your late 40s and early 50s, who might look at the prospect of the retirement age raising with not much glee, though there is a wider economic case to be made, the government would argue, and indeed others as well, that simply people are living longer, that they are able to work for longer, and thus, given the amount of money now spent on pensions, that the amount of the slice of the pie that it takes up of general taxation, that it is not economically sustainable not to look at the retirement age. It's something that is happening elsewhere in the world. In fact, there have been demonstrations in France in the last couple of weeks where they're looking at raising their retirement age, though it must be said, from 62 to 64. Now, under the current plans, it must be said that the threshold is due to go up from 66 to 67 in 2028 and then to 68 not until 2046. However, as you say, ministers, including the Chancellor, are looking at bringing this forward, potentially to the mid-2030s, though it's thought that the Work and Pension Secretary, Mel Stride, is actually in favour of bringing it forward to 2042. So it does feel like quite a long way off, but it would have an impact, as I say, in those in the late 40s and early 50s. While the government potentially talking about all of this. While you look, as you were talking about, Eamonn, just then, the public finance are not in a great state at the moment. We borrowed a lot of money in December of last year, more than at any time in any month since records began in the early 1990s. And so the government are looking at the economic reality of all of this, thinking we do need to do something. In saying that, I suspect the Prime Minister's question time a little later on today at 12 noon, it's actually going to be dominated by something entirely different, and that is the Conservative Party chairman, Nadhim Zahawi, and his tax affairs. We know he faced a penalty fine from HMRC when he was the Chancellor of the Exchequer last year, and there'll be lots more questions about what the Prime Minister knew and when, and whether Nadhim Zahawi should stand aside as this investigation is carried out, which is proving problematic because the government and the Prime Minister insisted that he shouldn't, but many Conservatives are now saying he actually should stand aside while we wait to find out the actual detail of what went on and who knew what and when.
You were talking there, Darren, about whether the pension and the pension pot is economically sustainable. Levelling up, which is why you're there in Manchester, Michael Gove will address this conference today. Is levelling up economically sustainable, or is it just a big illusion?
Well, that's what critics will accuse it of being, isn't it, Eamonn? That they look around and say, you know what, you're chucking a couple of £1 million here, maybe 50 million quid there, but that's not going to change the fundamentals of some of the economic problems facing places like the north of England. Now, Manchester is doing very well for itself at the moment, but that's not true of lots of smaller towns and cities in the northwest and the northeast of England. And yeah, many people feel quite frustrated that actually levelling up is not achieving what it was set out to do, and also that it's not primarily focused on the north of England, as many people were led to believe it was. You look at some of those kind of projects that were funded last week by the government, and many of them were in the south of England, not just here in the north or indeed the Midlands. And that's why lots of the mayors who are going to be here in Manchester, as you say, alongside Michael Gove and his shadow Lisa Nandy, are going to argue, stop this. We do not need a begging bowl from Whitehall where they dole out this money every couple of years. What we need is you give us the money, you give us a budget, and we'll decide where it's spent because we know our communities best. And that's the argument that actually both Labour and Conservative mayors are going to make here in Manchester today. And to be fair, I think it's an argument that Michael Gove might be open to. So it'll be interesting to see whether, in the end, levelling up actually means more devolution for parts of the country like Manchester.
Darren, thank you very much for that analysis. As Darren was saying there, that's the views of the mayors, of the leaders who'll be at that convention. But our reporter, Sophie Reaper, has been speaking to folks living in the region to give their views on what they would like to see as part of levelling up.
The phrase levelling up has always been controversial. Originally part of the Conservative Party's 2019 manifesto, the idea is to close the gap between the southeast and less prosperous areas of the UK.
It's simply wrong that individuals in communities in the North and the Midlands have limited life chances and fewer opportunities than those in London and the southeast.
One part of levelling up is, of course, improving regional infrastructure. For that, the construction industry requires support, but are they getting what they need?
I would like to see more people come into the industry with a higher level of skill and training. I'd like to see more women in the industry. I'd like to have our industry reflect the wider society. So not quite yet. It's early days, and to actually change the amount of people that come into our industry will take a significant amount of time.
Last year, the government set out 12 levelling up missions to achieve by 2030. Just one of those was to significantly increase the number of people with high-quality skills training in each region. I asked Sean what he made of the government's progress.
I actually think the distribution of what the government spends in the construction industry needs to be more even. So we need to improve our infrastructure. That would include hospitals, roads, homes, education. We need more money invested in those areas.
Last week, the North received £583.1 million in order to level up. But with both the North East and Yorkshire and Humber receiving less money than London, questions have been asked about just how fairly that money has been divided.
Right, so
When asked, this is what the Prime Minister, Rishi Sunak, had to say.
What we're doing is investing in local communities across the country. Levelling Up is about making sure people feel pride in the places they call home. It's about driving jobs and investment. That's what we're doing.
Huge investments have been made across the north of England, including £50 million for a new Northern Eden project in Morecambe and £20 million for a quayside regeneration in Gateshead. But do the people of the north feel they will actually benefit as a result? Do you think you've benefited from levelling up?
No. Yeah, they may have put some in Morecambe, 50 million, but that's to build a brand new thing that isn't there at the minute.
Well, the government need to start caring, not just the government, local authorities as well. Because we run a food bank here. We're basically giving free food away, and we've got a lot of families struggling, and people actually willing to considering to take their own lives because they're struggling. That's not levelling up to me.
It just depends. If they put it in education and they put it in NHS, yeah, I would have benefited. But I don't think I benefited.
It's clear that money is definitely being invested here in the north of England, but only time will tell whether it will actually lead to levelling up. Sophie Reaper, GB News.
Time at 10 minutes past 9. Let's bring you up to date with the rest of today's top stories.
The United States and Germany are planning to send tanks to Ukraine. The US president's preparing to announce plans to send around 30, whilst the German Chancellor has reportedly decided to send at least 14 after lots of international pressure.
The pub chain JD Wetherspoon has revealed that its sales last year were far higher than the previous year after a strong Christmas, but still lagging behind pre-pandemic levels. They said sales surged by nearly 18% over the last 3 months of 2022.
Microsoft services have gone down around the world, leaving users unable to access Teams or Outlook. The company says they're investigating issues that are impacting their services.
OK, now the Channel migrant situation. A huge surge in small boat crossings is underway in the English Channel this morning. This is all weather related. Criminal people and smuggling gangs are taking advantage of a break in what was foggy or stormy weather.
Well, GB News sources can confirm that at least 170 people have been taken to Dover after they were intercepted in 4 small boats in the Channel overnight and this morning. And our Home and Security editor, Mark White, is there for us. So, Mark, this is even before the better weather arrives. We are seeing these crossings continuing. And as you say, or have been telling us, we're expected to see that go up considerably in the coming days.
Yeah, I think we're in for quite a significant day of cross-channel operations as far as border force and other maritime assets are concerned in trying to deal with these small boats coming across from France. Sources have suggested to us that at least 1,000 may attempt to kick off from the beaches of northwestern France to make it across the Channel. And the reason why we're expecting such a surge today is really that because the last couple of months, the winter storms have prevented all but a few days really of being accessible for these criminal gangs to try and push these inflatables out into the Channel. You've got any kind of wind and tide conditions that are adverse in the Channel, it makes it pretty impassable for these tiny inflatables. So they need pretty much flat calm. That's what they've got today. The weather started dying down overnight. We got the first vessel coming in the hours of darkness and picked up by the Border Force vessel Volunteer. They were landed here just after midnight. Volunteer went back out again into the Channel, picked up another 2 small migrant boats and took again just under 90 people from that particular interception. They were taken again back to Dover, and since then, just in the last half hour, the Border Force vessel Typhoon has arrived here with another 40 plus people. Several more boats have been sighted in the English Channel as we speak. Another Border Force vessel, Defender, we understand, is about to pick up their latest batch of migrants. Now, this activity we're expecting to continue throughout today as these criminal gangs take advantage of a weather window that will close in again later today, and it's expected to remain pretty horrific out there in the Channel until at least the weekend. So not many avenues for them to get across, but when the weather does subside, they're certainly taking advantage of it.
So what sort of pressure, Mark, does that put on border forces? I mean, you're there, you're surveying the scene around you there. Are these people out in force? I mean, are they doubling their numbers? Are they doing anything? I suppose there's nothing much they can do once these migrants land. They've got to process them, haven't they?
Yeah, I mean, they are out there in significant numbers, Eamonn. They have been helped by the fact that we've had a couple of months of really bad weather conditions. So they've not been as overworked as they were towards the back end of last year and in the summer, of course, where we were getting very significant numbers arriving day after day after day. And that put a tremendous strain on the resources that they had available. You'll remember, of course, that last year almost 46,000 people crossed the English Channel in small boats. Now, the contingency planners at the Home Office are quietly planning for potentially double that number, but it's all going to be dependent again on the weather. They were planning for 60,000 last year, but the weather towards the back end of the year meant that that number came in short of 60,000. Certainly, no one wants bad weather as such, but it would help take the pressure of Rishi Sunak, who's under tremendous pressure to get to grips with the small boats crisis. He's promised to do all he can to try to stop these boats coming across, and to that end, in just a couple of days' time, Border Force will take over Channel operations again under a new combined small boats operational command, taking Border Force, the National Crime Agency and the military all under one umbrella.
OK, Mark, thank you.
Mark's going to be there throughout the day bringing you reports on GB News, and so stay tuned for that and see how the day develops and how that weather envelope opens.
Now, we want to hear from you. Are you listening or watching in Scotland, or indeed will you be celebrating Burns Night, which happens, of course, this evening here?
I'll celebrate anybody's night. I'm not even Scottish. I'm happy to do all of that.
I'm a Webster, so I think technically there's some Scottish in there. I certainly love the Highlands. We're going to be talking more about the traditions and the poetry and the man behind the celebrations after this.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back.
Eamonn Holmes, back on the TV
Surprised
with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamonn. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamonn Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like.
Absolutely.
On Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Today, Scotland celebrates the 264th birthday of its national bard, Robbie Burns.
But over the last year, the 18th century poet has actually faced criticism over the moral dilemmas he faced during his lifetime. And our reporter, Tony Maguire, has been to Glasgow to find out more.
So, Burns Night is already upon us. But it's been a tough old year for the bard. Discussions have been ongoing on whether or not to reference his brush with the slave trade alongside his portrait hanging in Scotland's National Gallery. I met one of Scotland's leading Burns experts at Glasgow University to get to the bottom of this latest attempt to cancel Robbie Burns.
If we rewind to May 1786, Burns's prospects aren't so good, and he tells us quite clearly he is thinking of going to Jamaica to work on the slave trade. But he knew fine that bookkeepers like others would be pressed into service. Burns was thinking of going, but of course, crucially, doesn't go. To emphasise that and not to cite the 9 instances where he speaks out against slavery seems to me to be a wee bit asymmetrical.
Going all the way back to my school days, everything I can remember about Robbie Burns tells me that he was a man for the people and he abhorred injustice. I asked Professor Carruthers just how fair is it that we're judging an 18th century poet by 21st century morality standards?
I don't want to downplay any injustice, and Robert Burns didn't want to downplay any injustice, and ultimately if we look at his writings in the round, he has a clear abolitionist voice. He is clearly against slavery. What do? Do we whitewash history? In other words, we cancel stuff. And the danger there is that we paper over the stuff that we might rightly want to object to.
Okay, so we've heard the academic perspective. What do the people think?
Do you think we should be judging someone that lived in the 18th century by 21st century standards?
Probably not, no. Because, he, contributes a lot to, primary school. Yeah, remember, some of his poems, and, it was always a big deal. Doing it in front of your school.
I mean, I think he's done so much for not even just Scottish culture, but global culture and literature that, I mean, especially if he didn't even take up the job, I wouldn't say that's enough to cancel him. Then I'm not sure where I stand on whether people from the 18th century should be cancelled or not.
So there we have it. Both Professor Carruthers and members of the public give a big no to cancelling Robert Burns. This is Tony Maguire for GB News in Glasgow.
From Glasgow to London, and the honorary life president of the Burns Club here in London, Jim Henderson, joins us now. Jim, lovely to see you. Hope you have a very good Burns Day, Burns Night.
Thank you.
And celebrations that we're talking here in London. They're truly international and they go on a while.
Oh, well, yes, over about 2 weeks. There just aren't enough pipers and haggis addressers and people to do the immortal memory to have them all on his birthday. So it tends to stretch over both weekends, the weekend either side of the 25th.
Yes. And today you have a solemn ceremony as well.
It's not terribly solemn because it is a birthday we're celebrating.
There'll be a wee dram.
Well, we go on to have a very nice lunch afterwards, which includes
you lay a
haggis.
wreath, though, yeah?
Sorry?
You lay a wreath.
We lay a wreath at his statue.
Yeah.
And we have our piper there and someone to sing some of his songs and some recitations.
And you wanted to read one to us this morning. So will you take us through the one that you've brought in and read it and tell us a little bit about it?
About the poem?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes, he wrote a wide variety of poems. This one is... some of them are very amusing. Some of them he was scathing about people that he disapproved of. But this was one of the local characters in the wee village of Mauchline. And it was an epitaph on a wag in Mauchline. And he wrote, "Lament him, Mauchline, husbands all. He often did assist you, for had you stayed whole weeks away, your wives they'd ne'er have missed you. Ye Mauchline bairns, as on you pass to school in bands together, O tread you lightly on his grass. Perhaps he was your father."
What's he suggesting there, I wonder?
I just wonder.
All sorts going on.
So it was a little bit of a poke of fun at a local character. He wrote epitaphs on people that he admired greatly, and one of his poems, Holy Willie's Prayer, was about a very narrow-minded elder of the kirk. And he essentially made so much fun of him. He tore his character to bits.
Oh, gosh.
So he's your equivalent, what, of William Shakespeare or something,
Yes.
is he?
He's in Poets' Corner, just beside Shakespeare's.
Oh.
Nicola Sturgeon's just posted one, which I actually really love, because she talks about poppies, and I have a poppy who was born on Burns Night, so it spoke to me. It says, "But pleasures are like poppies spread. You seize the flower, its bloom is shed, or like the snowfalls in the river, a moment white, then melts forever."
Yes, I think that's a lovely piece. And he writes that really in pretty much the standard English of his day. And most of the rest of it, where it's all about witches dancing in a derelict church, and Tam being chased by the witches, and most of that is nearly all.
Witches started in Scotland, in Leith. The witch hunt started in Leith, in Scotland. Yes, that's a little bit on the side there for you. Lovely to talk to you. That's Jim Henderson. He's the Honorary Life President of the Burns Club in London on this Burns Day, Burns Night. Thank you very much indeed, and thanks for your little rendition.
Yeah, and have a happy Burns Night, whatever you're doing for it. Perhaps you're not. Let us know. And I'll be back tomorrow bright and early at 6 o'clock. Andrew Pearce here. Coming up next, Tom Harwood with the briefing.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. B, I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.